Among the crowd of hungry monsters and clouds of dust, a guy is visible. His cloak is fluttering in the wind, and he himself fearlessly and unwaveringly stands in place, as if not noticing the evil creatures. This guy is an alchemist. He uses a technique that combines several things to create something new. It also allows him to use spatial storage. Knowing alchemy will solve any problem. And right now the guy confidently takes out several magic swords from his storage. Undoubtedly, they are created with the help of alchemy. A wave of the staff, and rays of light appeared around, and then a dozen swords, which eliminated the threat in an instant. This guy is not an ordinary person. He is a genius, a chemist. Vaiken Ordo. The system shuts down completely, and at that moment, the capsule door opens, causing powerful wind currents and clouds of dust to rapidly fly around. When the capsule opened completely, Vaiken Ordo carefully emerged from it. Holding onto the edge of the structure, he carefully moved one leg first, looking around in surprise. The boy, surrounded by unfamiliar landscapes, slowly turned around, carefully examining everything that surrounded him. He tried to understand where he was, but to his surprise, absolutely everything around him seemed alien and unfamiliar. All he saw around him was nothing more than a ruin, a pile of rubble that had long since been overgrown with greenery. These ruins had once been part of a beautiful building, of which only a testimony to its former glory remained. Vaiken Ordo was faced with a serious illness, and despite all his efforts and attempts to cope with the disease gradually and inexorably destroyed his former body, which was once full of strength and health. A brilliant idea came to his mind, and as an experiment, he entered the cradle of rebirth to cure his illness. Because of this, he ended up in a coma and slept for a very long time. The boy was overwhelmed with strong feelings of joy and delight. He was shaking from an incredible excess of emotions. He realized that all his efforts were crowned with success because he was still alive, which brought him an indescribable feeling of happiness. Vaiken threw his head back and, confidently filling his lungs with air, took a deep breath. He felt that his memory remained with him, and the illness that had been troubling him had now retreated. He no longer experienced coughing fits. He smiled sarcastically, remembering the exclamations and anxiety of those to whom he told about his idea. "You saw, right? My experiment was successful." The alchemist chuckled. The hero, suddenly turning around, noticed his reflection in the mirror and was overcome with surprise at what he saw. It was an unexpected sight that made him stop and carefully examine his image. The body has become impressively youthful, as if it were 20 years old again, returning all the freshness and energy that was inherent in it in its youth. However, this was not sad news at all, as the memories of the past remained with him, and inside he was still over 40. Vaiken, feeling a surge of joy with a wide smile on his face, announced his determined intention to continue his in-depth research in the field of alchemy, which he loved so dearly. However, there was still one more, no less important question. What happened, and why was the laboratory in such a state? Snapping his fingers, the alchemist ordered the test to be launched. The boy wanted an explanation from Zosimos. In the silence, Vaiken's demand to his faithful assistant sounded. A small light reminiscent of a bright star suddenly descended from the sky itself, emitting a blindingly bright light. Zosimos' answer came through the air. He is a fairy artificially created by Vaiken. The guy happily greeted his friend. It seemed they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Zosimos only responded to the owner's request. Verification completed. 521 years and 17 days have passed. Vaiken, unable to believe what he had just heard, asked again. Fear gripped him, he exclaimed, believing that this could not be true. 521 years. There was horror in his voice, unable to comprehend that such a thing could happen. He threw up his hands and asked in amazement if he had really slept for so long, to which he received the answer. The alchemist had slept for 521 years inside the cradle of rebirth. But what happened to the lab? Where is everyone? What happened to the Mortis dynasty? There were many questions, but unfortunately there were no immediate answers. It is necessary to check the archives, because Zosimos was in sleep mode. After checking the archives, the assistant reported that there was nothing left. The hero screamed in surprise. How could this be? The sages no longer function, so the data from the archives may be inaccurate. The hero wondered what happened. War? Catastrophe? He needed to calm down. Zosimos advised him to write everything down. The hero sat down to write down everything that had just happened and what he knew about his rebirth, about how long he slept. Having calmed down a little and exhaled, Vaiken Ordo realized that this was actually a very interesting situation. And indeed, all this was a simply amazingly curious thing for the alchemist. He even became enthusiastic. Not only did he manage to be reborn, he also found himself in another time. The hero and the fairy rejoiced. It was a success. So much time has passed. Alchemy has probably developed to unprecedented heights. The alchemist reveled in what had happened. So many new and exciting things awaited him. As a researcher, he was very eager to look at the wonderful future. Now it was a completely different era. With great joy and excitement, he imagined in his mind exactly how different cities looked today, how the images of people filling the streets were changing around him, how the streets had changed and under the influence of time and new trends. It is impossible to be sure that the future has changed so much. The hero intended to check it personally and ordered the fairy to teleport him to the nearest city. Having opened his eyes, Vaiken was already standing on a ledge from which the entire city could be seen. A completely ordinary city. Looking around the streets, the hero was perplexed, but how could this be? Zosimos, together with his master, looked around, flying briskly over the roofs of houses. Vaiken, looking around in confusion, could not believe that 500 years had passed and the surrounding landscape remained almost unchanged. He always thought that the future would be completely different, but the reality turned out to be different. After some time, his assistant was able to gather some information from the archive. Even bits of information were very valuable to them now. They found themselves in a part of the country called the Kingdom of Juri, namely in the city of Salwan. This country is already 200 years old, and it is ruled by a king with the help of an aristocracy, a classical monarchy. Such was the verdict of Zosimos. But the most important thing is that there was no information or mention of alchemists in this country. It seemed that they never lived or worked here, and their existence was completely erased from history. Vaiken, with apparent calm, but at the same time clearly feeling a share of sadness and disappointment, exhaled, as if trying to release all the accumulated emotions and internal experiences. The alchemist indignantly shouted that this simply could not be. It was simply impossible to believe, despite the fairy's displeasure. Alchemy is capable of solving the most diverse problems of humanity. It is very important for man. It is used in different spheres. It simply cannot exist. The hero waved his hand at the fairy's objections and pointed out that it was not worth relying only on the archives and that everything needed to be checked independently. Zosimos could only justify himself by saying that the sage's tower was controlled by someone strange. Vaiken, walking along the streets of the city, looked around the surrounding area with curiosity. Everywhere he was surrounded by familiar buildings, people passing by, and the mundane scenes of everyday life. No matter how hard he tried, nothing he saw could catch his eye or hold his attention. He finally got to a market, which was full of bright colors and pleasant aromas. On the counters lay fresh vegetables, fruits, and various baked goods. People were moving back and forth, each of them immersed in their own thoughts and affairs, discussing goods, choosing the best, or simply enjoying the atmosphere of these places. Suddenly, Vaiken grabbed his stomach, which was growling from hunger. It was very uncomfortable and even a little painful. The alchemist, thinking about his affairs, only now realized that he had not eaten or drunk anything for 500 years. He urgently needs to find money to buy food, but the value of money has clearly changed a lot over the past 521 years, and it's hard to even guess how much he needs for food. Vaiken turned around at the sound of the merchant's voice, which quite unexpectedly addressed him. The young man, dressed in a dark cloak, held a small jar filled with a shiny potion tightly in his hands. Convincing that it was a healing potion that could restore health and strength, he also had an antidote potion. Without hiding his joy, Vaiken rushed at the seller with questions about whether he had made the potion himself and whether he was an alchemist. Having received an affirmative answer, he snatched the bottle from the young man in the cloak. The alchemist studied the vessel and its contents with concentration and attention. It seemed as if he was conducting a deep analysis, trying to understand the composition, taste, and aroma of the liquid inside without even opening the vessel itself. But the joy quickly turned to disappointment. It was just trash, not a potion. It contained the cheapest ingredients that could be found. The hero frowned. If he had cooked something so terrible, he would have forced himself to redo it 100 times. Although, perhaps this merchant simply had a very small profit. His stomach betrayed him with a loud growl. Vaiken had a lot of questions, but right now he was more worried about something else. The merchant advised him to go to the tavern across the street. Above the door of this tavern hung a beautiful wooden figure of a duck in flight, spreading its wings wide, and next to the door was the name, The Dancing Duck. With curiosity and slight surprise, examining the appearance of this simple but at the same time quite beautiful building, the hungry alchemist could not help but smile at how such an unpretentious building could evoke such pleasant feelings. The hero and his assistant agreed that the tavern looked impressive from the magnificent wooden figurine to the roof itself. However, Zosimus raised the rather important issue of lack of money. But Vaiken quite calmly decided that this was not a problem. Of course, he is an alchemist. His skills will easily cover the costs. And if he has to wash dishes, he can simply create a special machine for washing dishes. While pressing the bell to call the employee, the hero shared his thoughts that he, the owner of the tavern, must be a kind person, and that he only had to explain himself, and he would immediately understand everything. A silhouette of a girl appeared behind the guy. She interrupted the guy's reasoning with her question. The stranger wanted to know who this person was who came here. As the girl came closer, one could see her sad face, her arms crossed over her chest, and her light wavy hair neatly tied with a scarf. She sadly informed them that the tavern was closed and asked them to leave. The alchemist and his assistant panicked. It seemed they were not particularly welcome here. The desire for food was stronger, and he wanted to explain himself to the girl, but her apologies interrupted him. The girl's eyes became glassy from the tears that were rolling down her face. Her father was bedridden with a terrible illness, and she alone could not cope with running the tavern. Vaiken, hearing this, decided to seize the chance and, introducing himself as an alchemist, offered his help. While the girl was surprised, the alchemist and the fairy were already discussing such a wonderful opportunity to pay for the room with medical services. But it seemed that her surprise was replaced by anger. Interrupting their hasty reasoning, she swung her arm and hit the intruder in the face with all her might. A loud bang echoed throughout the building. Unable to hold back her tears, the blonde confessed that she would never trust the alchemist again because her father fell ill after drinking vitamins made by the alchemist. Vaiken couldn't contain his surprise. He was eager to help the tavern owner and began to beg his daughter to let him in. But she was categorical. The hero did not give in. He was ready to offer his services even for free. But the girl did not give in to persuasion. How can one believe such sweet words? After the girl calmed down a little and put her thoughts in order, she decided to ask him a question. She was interested in him. She looked at him with curiosity and asked why he was so persistent in trying to help her father. Zosimus took matters into his own hands, and while he was saying that they liked the tavern and that it was clear at first glance that the owner was a very good man, his master only shook his head in agreement. The girl began to doubt. Bacon's assistant convinced the girl that the alchemist was very experienced, and at the same time asked the girl to introduce herself. Her name is Fiora. She is a waitress at this tavern. Zosimus also introduced himself and said that he was an artificial fairy created by his master who put his knowledge into him. When he wanted to introduce his master, he simply walked past. It seemed he had already switched to alchemist mode, concentrating on the problem. The assistant introduced his master as Vaiken Ordo when he was already entering the room with the sick man behind the girl. In the corner of a cozy, well-furnished room stood a bed with a sick man. He was carefully covered and did not move at all, as if he was already in another world. The alchemist came closer. He saw a simply terrible picture. The man was decomposing alive. There were disgusting ulcers on his face, and the skin seemed to be peeling off the fabric of his face. Vaiken immediately realized that this wasn't just a potion poisoning, things were really bad. The toxic decomposition occurring within the body caused it to literally rot from the inside out. This condition was simply horrific and deeply repulsive. The man's daughter, unable to hold back her tears, told him that her father had fallen into a coma the day before and that foul smell had immediately begun to fill the room. The situation was much worse than the alchemist had imagined. It's just outrageous how incompetent and, one might even say, an irresponsible alchemist did it. Besides the fact that they sell low-quality goods, their methods of treatment only make things worse. This can never be forgiven, and that is why Vaiken was simply in terrible anger. This situation shocked him and made him very angry, causing a storm of emotions inside him. With a strong determination and the intention to make a change in the current situation, he raised his hand. As soon as he did so, it was enveloped in a soft and pleasant light, radiating warmth. The guy, who was confident in his abilities and his strength, was determined to focus and get the job done, as it was time to show everyone around him his true potential and talents. Without stopping his creation, he gave the order to the fairy to determine what had brought the patient to such a state. He waved his hand, drawing a strange symbol in the air with light, and at the same time insistently urged his assistant A. A minute later, an alchemical pot appeared in the room. It forms a small space inside in which one can synthesize and replace conceptual information of various substances. Meanwhile, Zosimus found out that the cause of this condition was the improper preparation of a potion for fatigue and restoration of stamina. Vaiken was furious. This is the main reason for the poisoning. Any amateur in alchemy knows how to prevent this. The worried girl turned to the alchemist, wondering if her father would be okay. However, the alchemist didn't seem to pay any attention to her words. He was completely immersed in his work. He continued to draw signs in the air, but now with both hands. His movements were clear and confident. He clearly understood what he was doing. The guy was surrounded by soft streams of wind, and 4 circles appeared at the level of his head. He, without losing the seriousness and concentration on his face, noted with obvious satisfaction that the girl very lucky in this situation. From all 4 circles appeared various ingredients for a potion, an unknown herb, a couple of bottles, and a pouch. The alchemist added that the girl should not worry about her father because he was here and would help him. Throwing his head back a little, he enjoyed what he was doing. It must be said that he had not felt so free and serene for a long time. Around him, as if in a magical atmosphere, streams of energy and light flowed, filling him with sincere delight and peace. When the ingredients appeared completely, Vaiken directed them into the alchemical pot, and they quickly flew in, leaving behind not only a blindingly bright path of light, but also a gentle, light breeze. The pot began to shine in such a bright and unusual way, as if a living fire had flared up inside it. This light, coming from it, gently enveloped the entire room, filling it with pleasant warmth, creating an atmosphere of coziness and comfort. The alchemist just spread his arms and continued to create energy and rays of light, and he himself realized that he liked it. He sincerely believed that the study and practical application of alchemy not only contributed to his personal development and improvement, but also allowed him to make a significant contribution to the creation of a bright future for all of humanity as a whole. It doesn't matter what happened to alchemy during the 500 years he slept, the main thing is that people have always strived and will strive for a bright future. This desire is an integral part of human nature. This is why Vaiken and the other alchemists conducted many studies together, one after another, in a relentless attempt to find ways to improve the lives of everyone around them. The alchemist remembered the faces of his comrades, who proudly studied new things with him and developed together, overcoming all the difficulties on their way. Closing his eyes and sharply crossing his arms in front of his face, causing a pop to resound throughout the room, the hero prepared for the final step. Shouting the command, "Create," he opened his eyes and sent streams of light flying around the room seemingly chaotically. However, after only a moment they merged together, forming one bright and sparkling star that shone. The light went out and the alchemist was already holding Arunia's spiritual medicine in his hands. It allows one to alleviate the symptoms of poisoning with the potion and starts the process of body regeneration. Having received the order to administer the medicinal potion, Zosimus began to absorb the potion from the open jar like a sponge, after which he flew up to the patient and began to circle above him, releasing the contents directly onto the bed. The medicine fell on the tavern owner like some kind of magic powder, glittering and reflecting the sun. You could see how the skin on the man's face immediately began to clear up, acquiring a healthier color. Zosimus finished his work and reported that the body would recover in a couple of hours. It was already clear that the medicine had helped, and a barely noticeable calm smile appeared on the man's face. Vaiken turned to the girl and reassured her. Now everything would definitely be fine with her father. Although the girl did not share his joy, she was confused, completely not understanding what had happened. The alchemist, pleased with the work he had done, smiled. This medicine would weaken the man greatly, but he would feel better, and therefore was worth giving him another 2-3 days to rest. Taking advantage of the situation to his advantage, the guy asked to stay in the tavern for a while in order to observe the patient's condition. The assistant was worried that the girl might tell someone about the strange flying cube, since no one here clearly knows about artificial creatures. But it seems Viola didn't even understand what it was. The young waitress burst into tears of happiness, and a warm and sincere smile appeared on her face. She didn't even know how to express her gratitude. Vaiken looked at her and smiled warmly in response, because he was simply doing what he considered his duty as an alchemist. It was his calling and his duty to the people. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. It seemed she had imagined alchemists completely differently. A few days later, while Vaiken was eating, he sighed heavily, and, holding his fork to his mouth, began to talk about his powers. He probably hadn't fully returned to normal, and some of his strength had left him. Zosimos confirmed his master's reasoning. His characteristics had indeed clearly changed. His magical and intellectual abilities had clearly been reduced, as had his psychological age, and so he should be careful. The sad alchemist resigned himself to the fact that he had become weaker and he would have to live with it. But suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by an elbow to the back. An energetic and cheerful tavern owner named Edgar, with a huge piece of juicy meat in his hands, with a smile on his face and sincere concern in his eyes, generously persuaded the young guy sitting at the table to eat more, because he was his debtor. Bacon awkwardly tried to refuse because he had already eaten his fill, but Edgar was adamant. A young body needs to eat a lot. It seems that because the tavern had very tasty food, the guy gained about 5 kilograms. The owner of the Dancing Duck patted the guy on the shoulder and assured him that everything was free for him. But the alchemist carefully moved away and expressed his desire to pay for everything anyway. Edgar asked if Vaiken was going to join the Adventurers Guild, since it was the easiest way for a traveler to make money. But the boy just looked at him in surprise. Who were adventurers? The tavern owner pointed to a tall building outside the window and said that it was a guild, and advised that I at least register there just in case. According to the archives, the Avantarusts are the closest thing to alchemists in this time. They probably also make money by any means necessary. Full to determination, the legendary alchemist who had slept for 500 years headed towards the majestic building. And the grateful Ophianta only waved her hand at him. The alchemist approached the bridge that led to the entrance to the guild. Banners hung on the building, and the guild itself had a watchtower and a beautifully decorated facade. Alchemy is not what it used to be, and now, a new threat is brewing. The first-generation alchemist was puzzled that he had slept for 521 years, was surrounded by a noisy crowd of rough men dressed in heavy armor. This armor only emphasized their physical strength. He always tried to live calmly and not provoke anyone, but as soon as he entered the guild, he was surrounded by men clearly showing their disdain and aggression towards him. The lost Vaiken, in a state of confusion and bewilderment, only raised his hands in a gesture of apology and, trying to clarify the situation, clarified what was wrong with him, why he caused such a reaction. Just an hour ago, the boy had walked across the bridge that led straight to the guild with full confidence and determination. He was eagerly awaiting what awaited him beyond these gates. He looked at it from the inside with admiration, and Zosimus, unable to contain his curiosity, also flew out to take a look around. There were beautiful candelabra hanging from the ceiling. The building itself had at least 2 floors. The first floor was filled with tables and benches, and the hall itself seemed to be filled with a variety of people. The adventurers, immersed in an atmosphere of joy, drank, ate, and chatted merrily. Drinks spilled on the floor and pieces of food flew in all directions, but no one cared. Bacon was clearly anticipating and curious about the amazing and interesting things he would be able to see in this place. However, his thoughts were interrupted when he suddenly heard someone calling him. The stern warrior pointed his finger at the hero and said that this place was not suitable for small children like him. Of course, this could be expected since he was being addressed by one of the veteran adventurers, Beowulf. Without losing his joy, Vaiken told how he came from a distant land and was told to look for work here. Beowulf was not happy with this answer. He grinned and asked if this was the reason why he wanted to become an adventurer. The guy, without losing his kind smile, continued to look at the stern warrior. The latter's face, apparently, was twisted with bewilderment and anger, which made him look even more menacing. The warrior, without thinking for long, suddenly turned around and, pointing his finger towards the reception desk, gestured for the boy to follow him. The other adventurers laughed. Beowulf was babysitting the newbie again. It seemed he liked that. Completely ignoring the laughter, the veteran called Shirley to register the newbie. The pretty girl clapped her hands and expressed her joy at meeting Beowulf and the newcomer. Her name is Shirley, and she is the administrator of the Adventurers Guild. Shirley offered to let Ward join them, but he refused, intending to be an adventurer all his life. And then, placing a heavy hand on Vaiken's shoulder, said that he would be one too. The administrator, with a warm and sincere smile on her face, warmly greeted the newcomer who had just joined their renowned Adventurers Guild. The alchemist awkwardly scratched his head and said that he had no idea who adventurers were or what they did. Realizing that he needed to clarify the matter, the alchemist asked for a more detailed explanation. Shirley and Beowulf exchanged silent glances, and at that moment it became obvious that his questions were not entirely appropriate and were causing concern. A couple of Vaiken's new acquaintances were horrified. The veteran pointed a shaking finger at the alchemist, asking how he could come here knowing absolutely nothing about adventurers. The first-generation alchemist awkwardly made excuses. He was from a very remote place, while Beowulf was wondering where the guy was from, tribe or jungle. The administrator collected her thoughts and drew attention to herself by coughing deliberately. She was determined to explain everything. Adventurers is a term used to describe people who take on various quests given by the guild. They take on quests at their own discretion and receive rewards for them. That was the girl's explanation. Now it's all clear. They're just jacks of all trades. In the era of Vaiken, it was alchemists who did this. While the boy was processing and digesting the information he had received, Beowulf pointed his finger at the task he was about to perform and advised the newcomer to watch and study in order to better understand. Beo chose the task of hunting a large and dangerous beast that was raging. The ad had a picture of this beast, and it really did make a very frightening impression. Vaiken began to read. The beast threatened the locals and hunted in the western forest, but he did not have time to finish reading about the reward. The adventurer had already gathered for the mission with his team and assured that the newcomer did not need to count the reward due to him. Beowulf and his team would receive it all, and then they would go have fun. The alchemist was surprised. He didn't think that a whole group was going on a mission. But after thinking for a bit, he decided to just choose another mission. Shirley decided to clarify what class Vaiken was, a mage or a warrior. A confident and enthusiastic guy announced in a loud voice that he was Vaiken Ordo, a great alchemist. Shirley looked at him in surprise, and the crowd of adventurers fell silent with great disdain. The air was filled with this stifling atmosphere. While the adventurers exhaled in irritation, Vaiken had absolutely no idea what exactly was happening and what was causing such a strong reaction. The administrator awkwardly pulled out 3 announcements and said that these were the only tasks for alchemists. While the crowd began to laugh at Vaiken, he was still confused. How could this be? Why so few? The more they talked, the more disappointed the alchemist became. The short-sighted adventurers were discussing who was even doing alchemy these days, of course. The guy wouldn't understand. Probably because he was from distant lands. There was no answer to the question of why the work of alchemists was undervalued. And it was scary to ask. I didn't want to make a fool of myself for no reason. Having sorted through the ads, Vaiken confidently handed Shirley one sheet. He intended to take on this particular order. The administrator warned him that fulfilling the order to create a potion that would facilitate healing could be quite difficult. However, she added that the newcomer has a whole week to figure out all the nuances. Suddenly, Vaiken was surrounded by adventurers from all sides. One even put his arm around his shoulder. The whole crowd laughed and mocked the guy, begging him to complete the task of what they considered useless support. When the alchemist, completely perplexed, asked why they were saying all this, the crowd only burst into loud laughter at how stupid this boy was. 2 mages drew attention to themselves by demonstrating their magical abilities and with self-confident faces said that now everything is decided by magic and miracles, and mages and clerics are the best support classes. Having finished their speeches and self-praise, they added that they did not expect much from the newcomer. The main thing was that he brewed useful potions and gave them to them. That was the most he could do. Completely confused, Vaiken decided to ask if magic and miracles were really based solely on the use of magical and divine power, to which Ken received an affirmative answer. Then the alchemist thought, they can solve problems only on the spot, and for a short time, they cannot use universal potions that can be prepared at any time. Everything fell into place, and this inspired the hero. This was the reason why adventurers united in groups. Otherwise, if they tried to act alone, they would have too many weak points and vulnerabilities. However, these words did not cause such delight in the crowd. The guy was surrounded from all sides, so that in the end he found himself practically pressed against the wall, unable to escape from this encirclement. The angry warrior screamed so loudly that the entire building and beyond echoed. How could an alchemist even say such a thing? It seemed Vaiken should have kept his thoughts to himself. But the crowd of angry adventurers did not calm down. They continued to swear. The skills of alchemists are nothing compared to magic and miracles, so the guy should quietly brew potions and play with pebbles. Vaiken Ordo was extremely disappointed that alchemy could have degraded so much in the 500 years he had been gone. He remembered the merchant he had met on the street a few days ago. Low-quality healing potions. That was the standard of quality these days. It seemed the alchemists were in the worst situation imaginable. Hopes were shattered by harsh reality because the hero was sure that alchemy would develop to unprecedented heights and reveal to people many unseen secrets that could change the world. The guy turned around abruptly and, with a serious attitude, to the shouts and indignation of the crowd, headed towards the administrator. Placing a box of healing potions on the counter, he asked where to hand the potions in. While the noisy crowd, who had been actively cursing him and expressing obvious displeasure just moments ago, now remained completely confused. Shirley asked in surprise where so much potion came from. The alchemist had only taken the order. But it turned out he had his own secrets. The entire box had been prepared in advance. The adventurers still didn't calm down. They couldn't believe it because potions are very difficult to brew. One adventurer snatched the bottle from Vaiken, declaring that it was just carbonated bottled water. The alchemist did not resist this at all. He was confident in his product. The man began to examine the bottle and froze. The potion that was inside was of extraordinary beauty and attracted attention with its bright color and shine. After carefully examining the contents, he confidently assured that this potion would most likely be of no use. However, under the loud and cheerful laughter of the confident crowd around him, he bravely and greedily began to swallow this strange medicine. The next moment, his face showed shock. He felt a surge of strength. He clearly felt a powerful surge of strength that overwhelmed his body, as if the energy was trying to burst out in a stormy stream. The medicine turned out to be so effective that the finger that the warrior had lost a long time ago grew back, as if nothing had happened to it. The warrior trembled as he examined his hands. He did not understand whether this was a dream or reality, because he had never encountered such a potion. He rushed to the alchemist with a desire to know how he had prepared such a potion. Vaiken, looking at him with surprise, only uttered a question that made him think. Would it have been better if the finger had not grown back? The adventurer shook his head. He bit his lip, trying to hold back tears of joy, but they treacherously continued to run down his cheeks. He burst into tears, like a child, and rushed to hug Vaiken. It turns out that the man was originally a hunter. When he lost his finger, he had to change classes. But now he can use a bow again. The other adventurers froze, listening to the adventurer's conversation with the newcomer. He showered his gratitude, calling this healing potion special, capable of curing any affliction. A deathly silence reigned, filling the room around like a thick fog. All the adventurers fell silent and froze in immobility, unable to utter a word, because no one expected such an outcome. All the adventurers, as if on command, turned around and instantly rushed to the administration desk, knocking each other off their feet and sweeping up dust from the floor. When the crowd died down a bit, Shirley timidly called out to Vaiken. The requests for healing potions increased. Much more. Shirley put a stack of papers on the table. Vaiken exhaled heavily. This was not what he wanted, of course. But perhaps it would only be better this way, although the volume of orders scared him. The crowd began to buzz again. This attracted the alchemist's attention. What was it? The crowd of previously aggressive men rubbed their hands greedily, anticipating drinking the potions ordered from the alchemist. Their eyes were glowing, as if they were ready to pounce on the guy at that very moment. It was all written on their faces. Zosimus was perplexed as to how everything could have turned out this way. Vaiken Ordo raised his head proudly and thought, this is his chance. It's time to show his true alchemy skills. After a while, he wiped the sweat from his face, putting another box of potions on the table. It seemed to be the last one. To Shirley's surprise, Vaiken again dealt with all the back ones too quickly. The sound of heavy feet was heard at the entrance. It was noticeable and attracted attention. Someone, slowly but surely and with he approached the doors of the guild with determination, and all the faces of those present immediately turned towards the entrance, full of expectation. It was a wounded Beowulf. All his armor was covered in blood, his hands and even his head. He was bleeding all over, holding back the pain by clenching his teeth. Worried and alarmed, Vaiken, seeing Beo in such a state, immediately asked what exactly had happened to the war that had led him to such a terrible situation. The alchemist looked at Beowulf in surprise as he staggered into the guild. His every move betrayed his fatigue. He was bleeding all over, walking with a huge sword on his back. The newcomer was puzzled as to what had happened to the veteran adventurer. He could not imagine how it had happened. The man was striking in his courage, despite the fact that they had to flee from a beast that turned out to be much stronger than they thought. He intended to return to the battle after a short rest to help his comrades. Vaiken took out one of the healing potions he had handed out to the entire guild today and handed it to Beowulf. Pleased with himself, the newly minted adventurer admitted that he had prepared the potion himself. The warrior drank the potion decisively, thinking that it certainly couldn't get any worse. However, the effect of this potion amazed him much more than he could have imagined. At that moment, he felt an instant and powerful surge of strength and energy that filled his entire body. His wounds were completely healed, as if the battle he had desperately fled from had never happened. He looked with surprise at the wounds where blood had been running just a minute ago. When Beowulf turned to ask how the alchemist had done it, the newcomer was already surrounded by an admiring crowd. Everyone applauded him, thus making him feel a little awkward and embarrassed at being so closely watched. The warrior didn't quite understand what had happened, but he was glad that Vaiken was in the spotlight and that his potion really helped heal his wounds and restore the strength lost in battle. He decided to head back and help his comrades, but the alchemist stopped him. With an expression of insistence on his face, he extended a few bottles, offering him to take them with him, assuring him that they would prove very useful. The veteran accepted the help and left, waving his hand and promising that upon his return they would drink together in honor of the victory. Zosimos expressed hope that the warrior would cope with the monster. The assistant also reported the discovery of traces of the sage's tower just in the direction of the western forest, where battles with monsters are currently taking place. Vaiken Ordo was inspired. This is excellent news. The sage's tower can be used as a house and at the same time store his alchemical materials and tools there. When the guy was already confidently stomping towards the exit of the guild, Shirley stopped him, assuring the alchemist that he was not going anywhere. It was absolutely clear that Shirley was determined. She asked the frightened Vaiken if he had read the license agreement of the guild he had recently joined. Having heard a negative answer, the administrator decided that it was time for her to explain in detail to the newly minted adventurer the key rules and regulations that apply in this place. The guild has a ranking system, from 10, the lowest, to 1, the highest. Tasks are given exclusively depending on the rank. Tasks can be taken strictly in accordance with the current rank. This ensures that members will receive tasks that match their skills and experience. Vaiken was clearly upset to learn that he started at rank 10 and therefore couldn't go hunting for dangerous monsters with Beowulf's team. Besides, Shirley was sure that an alchemist had no place on the front lines. The administrator laid out a stack of orders, indicating that the guy could choose any of them, but not any other. The girl, smiling, took the top sheet of paper and, expressing interest in what was there, tried to attract the newcomer's attention. When Shirley realized that it didn't help, she carefully approached him from behind, poked him in the shoulder, and whispered in his ear that if she drank from him, who knows, she might even fall in love. Obviously not expecting such pressure, the guy immediately rushed to the exit, running away from the threats and leaving behind the grinning girl. And while Shirley, pleased with herself, smiled slyly, wondering whether she had gone too far, Vaiken had already run to the western forest. Despite all attempts to strongly persuade the alchemist, the girl's persuasion could not have the desired effect, and the guy ultimately, without hesitation, headed into the thick of the forest where the battle was taking place. What doubts could there be? After all, if there were any alchemical materials here, then Vaiken simply had no right to remain on the sidelines. It was unacceptable for him to miss such an opportunity. Zozimos finally figured out his master, hinting that he ran away from Shirley. It's funny his master is already over 40, but he still hasn't had a girlfriend, although he justifies himself by saying that for a real researcher, women are secondary. The reasoning came to an end when the alchemist came to the place where the battle was going on. The warriors were trying their best to fight off the evil monsters, although there were many more of them. Bacon looked around carefully, trying to get a full picture of how critical and difficult the situation was. It seemed that the situation was truly dire. Beowulf held back the monster with all his might, but his comrades could no longer stand on their feet. From behind the trees appeared the most powerful enemy, the great mag beast, the lesser Terrace Squake. He was simply huge when he opened his mouth and let out a deafening roar. His very sharp teeth were exposed. Zosimus checked the archives and reported that it was a new species. Vaiken quickly realized that the material he could extract from it would also be new. Beowulf noticed the alchemist and began to scold him. Why did he even come here? There is no place for beginners here. The monster is too strong. The alchemist, immersed in his own thoughts, no longer paid any attention to the world around him, and his face became serene. But an ominous grimace was clearly visible on it, giving him a gloomy and mysterious look. Beowulf wanted to stop the guy, but it was too late. Vaiken was just muttering under his breath about materials, about how much new stuff he could get. The next moment he was ready for battle. The holes in his storage were open again, and 4 shiny stones appeared from them. Where would the alchemist begin to search for the weak point of the monsters? The stones that the boy clutched in his hands had a special nature and meaning. These were not just ordinary stones, but unique artifacts that personified the 4 main elements. Bacon didn't waste much time thinking and doubting, because he instantly came to the conclusion that the best solution would be to give up everything at once. While Beowulf's crew watched what was happening with their mouths open in bewilderment, the alchemist launched all 4 stones at the monsters with all his might. Some were burning alive in the fire and could not put themselves out. Others were frozen in blocks of ice. Others were lifted into the air by the wind, like a tornado, and thrown back to the ground with a roar, and others were also not so lucky. They suffered from lightning strikes. The adventurers were at a loss as to what this was. It wasn't even magic, but the effect of objects. They had probably never encountered such power before. Bacon didn't even think about stopping. He continued throwing stones, which Beowulf and his team barely had time to dodge. Only when the entire clearing was strewn with the carcasses of defeated monsters did the alchemist finally stop, and the previously heard roar of pain from these creatures gradually died down, dissolving into the air. The guy didn't even have time to understand what the weakness of these monsters was. They turned out to be too frail. But surprise did not leave the faces of the adventurers. Chuckling, the satisfied alchemist decided that fire was the most effective after all. In fact, he didn't even realize how terrifying he looked at the moment, completely immersed in his thoughts and thoughtful amusement. But now the warriors felt complete horror at his presence. He really did look unexpectedly terrifying to them. Bacon turned his head, still with the same creepy grimace, and turned his attention to the last monster left alive after his elemental stones. He stood right in front of the huge and loudly roaring monster, not showing a drop of fear and not flinching from its piercing roar, as if already throwing him a real challenge, ready to enter the fight. Circles appeared on the floor from which streams of light emerged, surrounding the alchemist. What was the weakness of this monster? How to attack it? The guy intended to find out all this. Magic swords of all elements began to emerge from the circles along with the lights. Vaiken was serious. He was clearly interested in what potential this huge monster had. The next moment, the guy took out a magical instrument and a reliable weapon from his storage, the alchemist's staff. When he took it out, he immediately swung it and gave himself the command to begin. All the swords he took out instantly turned their points toward the monster, ready for a decisive blow. The next instant, they simultaneously began moving in the same direction at the speed of light. Dozens of swords fell upon the little Terraskin in an instant. The monster could only growl helplessly in pain. However, the monster turned out to be not so simple and still continued to stand confidently on its feet, suddenly becoming a source of surprise not only for the alchemist, who expected a greater effect from his actions, but also for the entire team of adventurers who watched what was happening with bewilderment and shock. With one sharp jerk, Vaiken cut off the head of the monster, which was the main one in this group and also the last remaining monster. The huge carcass and head fell to the ground with a terrible crash, drenching it with oozing blood. The monster was definitely defeated. The adventurers just sat there and watched everything that was happening with their mouths open. How could an alchemist do all this, and at such a young age? And the most terrible thing about all this was that the first generation of alchemists, 500 years ago, were engaged in collecting materials on their own, and not just sitting in laboratories over potions. And this monster became just another victim of one of the most dangerous alchemists, Vaiken Ordo. A smile never left his face when, armed with a sharp knife, he carefully and greedily cut out the valuable and rare material he needed for his dangerous experiments. After some time, Vaiken was already in the tavern, the Dancing Duck. Suddenly, a bag full of coins fell on the table with a clanking sound. The coins scattered across the table, creating even more noise. The alchemist looked up from his work and asked Beowulf what kind of money he had poured out, to which he received an answer. It was part of the reward for killing the lesser Terrasquek, although the boy had only the materials he had collected. The adventurer shook his head. Sharing a well-deserved reward is one of the main rules of adventurers, and therefore, he was not going to retreat. The warrior even made a deal with the administrator, telling him that Vaiken was a temporary participant, although it was not his assignment. Having stopped objecting, the guy accepted the money, deciding to invest it in opening a laboratory. And while the guy was expressing gratitude to Beowulf for the funding, he became interested in what the alchemist was cooking. He was very happy with the question and decided to demonstrate his creation. Vaiken was inventing a stove that didn't require wood. He proudly presented his creation, which had 40 temperature settings, a fire protection system, and a heat-saving function. Beowulf had already begun to brush off the persistent stories of the guy who simply wanted to leave the personification of the wisdom of alchemists in this tavern when suddenly Theo came in. That's what Vaiken called her. The girl smiled happily, folding her hands to her chest. She seemed to be inspired with joy when she saw this amazing invention. Seeing such a reaction, the alchemist pointed his hands at the stove and offered the girl to use his creation, expecting that she would rush to hug him as a sign of gratitude. It seems that Vaiken miscalculated somewhere because this joy was directed not at him and his creation, but at Beowulf. The girl approached him and asked what he had forgotten here. The alchemist's disappointment was indescribable. The waitress, to the guy's disappointment, was hanging around Beowulf and inviting him to have a bite to eat in the tavern. Vaiken, puzzled, asked how Theo knew Beowulf. To the guy's surprise, the girl told him that he was the strongest adventurer in this city, and that's why everyone knew him. The alchemist found himself in an unexpected situation that left him confused. He, not hiding his displeasure, puffed out his cheeks and mumbled something incomprehensible about Beo's popularity. Beowulf was not the most discussed topic right now, though. The city was most interested in this mysterious alchemist of incredible power, whose potions could cure anything. A little later, Beowulf and Vaiken headed to the Sullivan Adventurers Guild. Suddenly, when they had just approached the entrance, a whole crowd of people rushed at them. They all begged the alchemist to join their groups. They were even ready to fight, for the right to get him into your team and use his abilities for your own purposes. The reason for this phenomenon was that rumors about the great alchemist, who possessed unrivaled knowledge and talents, spread with incredible speed. And although he received dozens of offers, he rejected them all. He had a strong and determined intention to open his own laboratory where he could realize his ideas and projects. And he would be ready to accept anyone who wanted to help him in his intentions. Beowulf helped the guy disperse the restless crowd by sending them to Shirley's desk. Warriors and mages rushed to leave their requests at the reception desk. However, it turned out that he did not do it with the best intentions. The adventurer carefully took out the order and invited Vaiken to join their team on this mission. Beowulf put on his most pleading face, hoping that it would help convince Ken, but apparently his efforts had little effect on the other man, who remained untouched. The offer did not imply that the alchemist would join the ranks of the Black Dogs, which was the name of the veterans group. And just as the warrior was enthusiastically sharing his thoughts on the essence of the task, which was related to an important escort mission and promised to be incredibly tense, someone who had just entered the guild suddenly interrupted him. The man who dared to do this was Vavai, the Black Dog's mage. It was obvious at first glance that he clearly had no intention of participating in a mission with an alchemist, especially one so young. Vavi proudly stated that if he had been with the Black Dogs when they fought the monsters, they would have dealt with them on their own, and help from a child would only be a burden to them. Coming close to Vaiken, the mage stared at him aggressively as if he was trying to break through the enemy's defense with his gaze. Clearly demonstrating his attitude towards him, Vavai barked sharply and loudly, ordering the alchemist to get out of here. The Black Daub's commander tried to calm his mage down, but he didn't even want to listen. He just screamed about how tired he was of babysitting stupid and incompetent adventurers. Vavai considered alchemists to be the biggest parasites in this world. He waved his magic wand and sent a whirlwind towards Vaiken. Fortunately, the boy reacted quickly and managed to jump away. And while everyone was trying to calm down the mage who was destroying everything in the guild, the guy was just wondering why alchemists were so hated in this world. It upset him terribly every time. And yet, Vaiken offered Vavai to talk and discuss everything, although we had already destroyed half the guild. The magician had no intention of listening to the alchemist. He, like hundreds of other alchemists, could not take responsibility for the mirror space. Mirror space is a unique concept that implies the existence of a world that is an absolutely identical copy of our real world. In the past, alchemists conducted large-scale experiments in such worlds. This was necessary because their complex and often powerful weaponry was sometimes difficult to test in real-world conditions. And finally, Beowulf lifted the veil of secrecy and explained what caused Vavai's strong anger. His older sister, due to an accident, was locked in the mirror space forever. The mage confirmed his commander's words. They dragged his sister away when she was only slightly interested in the Magic Academy. They immediately began testing an artifact called Darby's Mirror on her. It seems that this artifact was disposed of about 500 years ago. How did it end up in this era, again? Vavai only became more and more angry. His sister would never return and would remain there forever. But no alchemist was ready to take responsibility for this. The magician was already out of breath, but did not even think of stopping. He swung at Vaiken again to strike, continuing his speech about wanting to get rid of every alchemist. The guy just grabbed his hand tightly, trying to hold it to avoid further blows. Vaiken, despite the heated passions and rage that literally emanated from his opponent, was amazingly calm, and even smiled at Vavai, who was seething with anger. The alchemist decided that he definitely had to help him. The mage got even more furious about this. What could this boy do? Vavai spent his whole life becoming a mage just to find his sister. He learned that he needed the sacred bell of Fulcanelli to do this. The adventurers had only heard about such an invention, that it only exists in fairy tales. That is why Vavai was completely desperate. He understood that his little sister would remain there forever. If only he had this bell, he would definitely be able to bring his older sister back. The mage, overwhelmed with grief and despair, could no longer hold back his tears. He clutched his head, feeling his heart breaking. And while the other adventurers sympathized with their comrade, Vaiken probably had something in mind. Smiling slyly, he reached into his pocket. It was from there that he took out the sacred bell of Fulcanelli and, smiling, handed it to Vavai. It seemed like a mockery, not a funny joke. The magician had been looking for a way to save his sister for so long, and then the boy did it so easily. He just took a bell out of his pocket, which doesn't even exist in this world. The alchemist explained that it was indeed the sacred bell of the Fulcanelli. However, Vavai, along with the commander of the Black Dogs, only became angry at what they heard, perceiving this statement as a cruel joke, unacceptable in their serious situation. Then Vaiken also took out a mirror, intending to demonstrate. To pull out those who got stuck and to deal with accidents, the sacred bell of Fulcanelli was created. When the theory of mirror space was first written, many different artifacts were created that did not work quite correctly, leading to accidents. As he prepared to use this mysterious artifact, Vaiken exhaled deeply. A feeling of irritation and frustration was growing inside him as everything that was happening around him definitely caused him great upset. In his time, this bell was made on every corner. However, the Royal Academy, being one of the most prestigious higher education institutions, does raise questions as to why it is unable to solve such a seemingly simple problem. The guy went deeper into his thoughts, continuing to search for the girl in the mirror space with the help of the bell. He could not get rid of the obsessive thought about whether he would be able to revive alchemy in this world. The alchemist found her. He pulled her into this world, and the room was filled with a bright, blinding light coming from the mirror. The guy jerked his hand, trying with all his might to bring the girl closer to this world. In the bright light, the figure of a girl gradually began to emerge, as if floating out of the mirror, accompanied by this amazing and magnificent glow. When the girl flew into this world completely, the mirror broke into small, sharp pieces. These fragments flew around the room with a loud sound, creating sparkling flashes and giving the atmosphere even more mystery. There was a slight blush on the girl's face, and she seemed to be fast asleep. A light breeze that arose from the parts of the mirror flying in all directions slightly tousled her hair. No one in the room expected this. Only Vaiken smiled confidently. He had done it again. The girl fell right on her rescuer, but he, fortunately, caught her successfully. Fortunately, he was prepared for such a development of events and managed to successfully catch her, thus preventing possible injuries and consequences from her fall. Vaiken explained to the sobbing Vabi that although he had saved his sister by finding her in the mirror world, she was now very weak and needed a week of rest, and then she would be able to live like before again. He handed the girl over to his sobbing brother. He couldn't believe that all this was really happening to him. He had long ago given up and was fixated only on revenge on everyone who, in his opinion, was guilty. The Vi could not contain his feelings and continued to cry without stopping as he was simply overwhelmed with joy that he was finally able to meet his dear and beloved older sister whom he had not seen for so long. The crowd of adventurers watching from the sidelines were both touched and shocked by what was happening. What else could Vaiken do? What would he surprise with next time? The magician, feeling the full weight of his actions, fell to his knees begging for forgiveness for his disrespect for the young alchemist. Even though he was over 40, he was profuse in gratitude and apologies. Vaiken was pleased with the work done and only smiled sympathetically at Vabe. Beowulf suddenly interrupted this very touching conversation with the news that they were leaving tomorrow for the mission he had spoken about earlier. A little later, the adventurers, tired from a hard day, were resting in the Dancing Duck. Theo was clearly displeased. She puffed out her cheeks in a childish, petulant gesture and glared at Vaiken resentfully, as if she expected him to react to her displeasure. Ken tried to explain that Bio had forced him to go with them, but the girl just snorted and turned away. How could he deceive her? He had promised to go with her to the party tomorrow. One of the adventurers, observing this situation, burst into loud laughter. He had never seen Theo like this. Apparently, she really liked the alchemist. The girl bit her lip in shame, but when Zosimo suggested that they retire, she could not stand it. The next day, already in the morning, the adventurers were standing on the street. They had finished all the preparations and were ready to begin the task. However, this idyll was interrupted by a shout from a man in glasses. It was a scientist from the Royal Academy, Gazar. He was actively dissatisfied and indignant about the fact that an alchemist took part in the expedition, which, in his opinion, was completely unacceptable. While Vaiken was awkwardly scratching his head, Bio persistently tried to convince the experienced scientist that the decision to take the alchemist with him would be very successful and that in the future he would not regret his choice. Gizar, his teeth clenched tightly with rage and indignation, growled with a sense of determination that he should not be taken for a stupid and naive child. He declared that alchemists were only vulgar pseudo-competitors for real scientists. The captain of the Chertmik P-Saf assured that they would not go without this guy, and in that case the scientists would be able to set off on the road alone, without their accompaniment. Zosimus poked his master's head cautiously. He wanted to warn him of his premonition that this mission would be dangerous. But that was precisely why Ken had agreed to go with Bao's team. This was a mission to escort Professor Geyser to the ossuary tower located in the ruins near the Dunatek River basin. After the rainy season, there are many monsters around the destination. The conditions are too unsuitable for exploration with a group of civilians. On the other hand, after the rainy season, there are many plants and seafood to be found there. Vaiken thought he might find something useful there. The guy made an attempt to convince the scientist on his own that there was no reason for any worries or concerns. He insistently assured him that he would not interfere with his important research in the future. Gizar just waved his hand irritably. In his opinion, such obvious things did not need to be voiced. Some alchemists would not be able to interfere with his noble research. The disgruntled scientist reminded him, "Time is money. Time to get to work," and trudged off to the cart. The alchemist breathed a sigh of relief, and Bio, patting him on the shoulder, headed after Gizar. The long-awaited journey finally started, and a group of several people enthusiastically set out. At this point, they have covered only a small part of the planned route. Ken was talking to his assistant. It had been a long time since they had traveled by cart. They had used the fast teleport too often. Sometimes it was worth just relaxing like that. The conversation was interrupted by a member of the Black Dogs, Oscar, jumping out of the cart. With a joyful smile on his face, he greeted Wayne and hoped that they would be able to work together and establish productive cooperation. The man decided to check with Ken if he would be okay with such a simple and informal address, since they were both members of the same guild. This implied that they were friends and comrades. Oscar's sister Miskull threatened her brother that he shouldn't relax. They were at work. Vevai, on the contrary, told the alchemist to relax a little. He was with the Black Dogs. But Miskull was right. Zosimos told his master that a group was approaching from the right side of the road. Ken immediately informed the Black Dogs about this, but they did not turn off the road. Just a few minutes later, the horse-drawn carriage was surrounded on all sides by armed bandits who acted quickly and in a coordinated manner. The demand they made was quite standard for people of their world who lived their way of life. They were looking for something truly valuable and meaningful, while threatening immediate death to everyone in the carriage without exception. The scientists, overcome with fear and confusion, quickly found shelter behind the backs of the brave adventurers, who were clearly dissatisfied and outraged by the unexpected meeting. While the bandits, full of evil delight, cackled and laughed, the Black Dog team quickly climbed out of the cart. They immediately lined up ready to repel any threat and protect Gizar. While the scientist was panicking, Beale was already thinking about battle tactics. He turned to Vaiken and offered to take on two of them. But the alchemist was lost in his thoughts again, completely ignoring the others. The guy was arguing that bandits hadn't changed a bit, and even after 500 years, all they could do was rob and kill. Ken stopped his arguing and turned to Beowulf. With a completely blank expression on his face, Ken finally asked if it was a crime to put someone to sleep permanently. While Beo was perplexed, the bandits, who clearly felt confident, laughed and rushed to attack the adventurers. Indeed, someone who is afraid of punishment should not even raise a weapon. With a sudden and unexpected blow, when no one expected action from Bacon, without the slightest hesitation he cut off the head of one of the bandits who was about to attack him. Blood spattered in all directions. The alchemist confidently declared that he was not afraid of any punishment. He simply wanted to know the true value of the life of each of them. The bandits froze in their places as if their feet had grown into the ground. Ken, feeling the growing tension, sighed heavily. It seemed that now he would have to deal with problems again. Pointing his staff towards the bandits, he threatened them. The best solution for them now is to pray. And if they do not want to die, they should fall on their knees and ask him for forgiveness 100 times. Gazar was in shock. He fell on his butt, his body shaking with fear. He asked what this was all about. The protagonist stood holding his weapon, and around him lay dozens of his defeated enemies. They showed no signs of life. Vaiken, a little confused, said that he thought he had shocked the professor a little. Then he asked how many people he should bring back to life. The man in the back continued to tremble with fear. Zosimos approached Vaiken and said that it seemed they could be brought back to life, to which the latter responded that it was sad. According to the 30-minute rule, a person can be revived with secret potions. Such a resurrection depends on the condition of the corpse. His acquaintances said that he stood out again. But he was a good guy. He didn't even need them. To which the main character apologized to them and said that next time he would choose a different method. After some time, their carriage moved on. They rode through the plains, Gizar still trembling with fear, biting his lower lip with his teeth. The protagonist apologized for the fact that he had indeed gone a bit overboard, to which he was told not to pay attention. Aristocrats were always cowards. All because they themselves never lift a finger but only sit in chairs. At this point, Zosimos interrupted them. He turned to Vaiken, calling him Lord, and said that he had finished what he had asked him to do. The main character thanked him. The assistant said that he was too kind. At that time, the enemies came to their senses. Zosimos said that they all should have come to life. Moreover, he dug into their heads. He does not think that they will take the path of a bandit. Bacon told him not to say that because they are people, and because even when they make a mistake once, they can make it a second time. The protagonist thought about how in his era, people started wars over and over again. They used weapons made by alchemists to kill each other. Even bandits were armed with alchemist weapons. He had also made a mistake when he naively assumed that this would not happen. At that time, He continued to drive the cart. The protagonist went deep into his thoughts. His face became sad. He thought about how many times he had already made mistakes. At the same time, the commander turned to the professor and asked if he understood why they took Vaiken with them, to which he answered positively. At that moment, the guy said that they still had a long way to go, so he should get ready. During the rainy season, there is a lot of water here. They can't go further by carriage, so they abandoned their vehicle and went on foot. Then they should meet a giant crab, a monster. They will all fight with it. Behind the last enemy, they will encounter a giant slime, and after it there will be large water insects. All this looks very scary. As soon as night falls, a crowd of skeletons will crawl out. These monsters will surround them. They will have a hard time confronting them. However, in order to achieve victory, the main character will use his weapon. A huge energy barrier will emanate from it, which will defeat all enemies with its power. The professor was shocked. At this point, the man was asked again if he was glad they took the main character with them. He was already getting angry and said that he realized how cool he was. The other man said that the biggest problem was still ahead. It's foggy here because of the rainy season. It remains to wait until it clears up. So they decided to eat. Everyone agreed. Gizar said that they were talking like that, they had to go faster. Did they really think that he was just in such a hurry? To which they replied that they were thinking about his safety. The man said that they were adventurers, so they had to come up with something. Another man stood aside. He said that the professor seemed to be obsessed with his work. Vaiken asked if research was really that important. They answered that he was sort of researching the history of magic. He was interested. After some time, they reached a new object. It turned out to be a tower, an ossuary. They were glad that they finally got to it. The protagonist at that moment thought that there was no doubt that these were the ruins of the Tower of the Sages. The team turned to the professor and said that there might be monsters ahead, so they shouldn't run forward, and then asked if he understood that. To which Gizar asked what he was saying. He didn't have time. He had to quickly solve the mystery of this tower and get himself a place in the academy. After that, the man quickly ran towards the facility. The others just thought about how much trouble he was causing. Vaiken wondered why he didn't have time, to which he was told that this tower disappears immediately after the rainy season ends. No one knows why this happens. Vaiken said that he understood everything and thought to himself that perhaps some functions of the Tower of the Sages still work. Is it really the fog that is everywhere here? It is from the bones. Radically fills the tower with bones and instead of knowledge. The protagonist turned to Zosimos and said that he had begun to act, to which he replied that he was beginning to restore the archive. Vaiken thought that these were the ruins of the former water city of Danate. Art and tourism had flourished here, and now only pitiful ruins remained. And indeed, instead of buildings, there were broken walls, fallen pillars. A moment later, the protagonist felt some currents. Zosimos addressed him, to which Vaiken said that he noticed that something was felt in the air. Then his assistant suggested retreating now. The main character said that Nushi lived here a long time ago. If he is still here even after 500 years, then it is very troublesome. Vaiken's gaze became very focused, but he was also very nervous. Looking at the monster in front of him, he thought that this would not be easy. The main character shouted to Bio that they needed to leave here immediately as a huge monster was approaching, to which the men asked him if this was his premonition again. If Vaiken was so scared, then it was definitely something dangerous. The guy said that if they were noticed, it would definitely be dangerous. They called out to Oscar and Miss Gull and told them to leave as they were planning to retreat. The professor started shouting about what nonsense they were talking. Then one of the escorts asked him if he didn't understand what was important now. Bio asked what was wrong with Gizar. The protagonist thought to himself that he was a researcher, he could understand him. Zosimos said that there was no time, the monster would be here soon. At that moment, the monster reappeared from under the ground with pieces of the surface flying in different directions. His acquaintances were shocked by what was happening. It was a giant monster, the Danate death worm. Everyone started shouting that they had never seen such creatures before. Someone said that they were very disgusting. In addition to the huge monster, small worms also appeared. Vaiken said that these were his children. You need to be careful. He also said that they are all very insatiable and quite ferocious. There are also more than 100 of them. We need to get away from the mud and water right now." His friend asked if they could handle them at all. After that, he called out to the professor. The bald man said that Kazar ran away from the monsters towards a destroyed building that looked quite dangerous, to which everyone asked him about it in shock. Zosimo said that in a combat situation it would have been better for him to be with them, but now he ran away, and that was bad. The protagonist agreed with him, but thought to himself that he couldn't just leave him to die. His conscience wouldn't allow it. Bacon clenched his fist and said firmly that he had no choice. Then a voice came from behind him, saying that he really had no choice. He was scared. It turned out to be his friend, the commander, who asked him whether he really wanted to risk his life for someone who disregarded the lives of his escorts. He said that they were leaving right now, to which the protagonist said that this guy is quite dry. Zosimo said that this is a really wise decision as a commander. Vaiken said that he will try to do everything on his own. The main character shouted to the others to run to the tower, the ossuary, because he will use dangerous artifacts. Everyone was shocked by these words. A small magic seal appeared in the protagonist's hands. He said seriously that he would figure out what to do with this creature. The commander asked what he was going to do alone. The other man agreed with him and said that it was impossible. But Vaiken asked again to listen to his request. His acquaintances told him not to dare die. If it became too hot, he should run. At the same time, they cleared their way, destroying the children of the worm. Zosimo said that Bio decided to cut a path for him to retreat. It seems that they have already become comrades. The protagonist agreed with him and said that it looks like that. After that, Vaiken turned his attention to the monster. He called out to him and said that he would be his opponent. After that, he took out an artifact, handheld explosive missiles, and rushed to attack. Almost immediately, he threw this artifact straight at his enemy. He also shouted at him to catch it. The blow hit the target, which he reported. The guy was incredibly happy. But then, something unexpected happened. The worm began sucking air into its mouth, then attacking him furiously. The protagonist did not expect this, so he cursed loudly. The beam was aimed right in his direction. The commander and other crew members began to shout his name, as it was not clear what was happening to him. Only Vaiken's silhouette was visible through the smoke. After a few moments, the smoke dissipated, as if the protagonist had pulled off a translucent fabric. As it turned out, it was Faunia silks, a very thin magical material that hardens on impact. Vaiken said that he didn't have much of this stuff, so he had to be careful. Then he decided to do something different and drank the hero's potion. It significantly increases physical abilities. After that, he threw the potion bottle back without even looking back. He looked determined. He said that they were starting the battle. The main character started the circle around the monster. It was very fast. The worm tried to attack him again with its beam, but the guy managed to dodge the attack. However, as it turned out, Vaiken decided to use his trick, and the worm's body exploded. His acquaintances said that it was amazing. Now they understood why he told them to move away. The professor asked if this was the alchemist's power. The protagonist thought that the defense was strong and damage almost didn't go through. If he didn't have to finish the fight, then maybe it would have worked out that way, but would he really have to use it? At this point, Zosimo asked how he could help him, to which Vaiken replied that the most important thing was that he not let the weaklings near him. His assistant said that he understood. At that moment, his cubic body began to glow. These rays diverged to the sides, thus dealing with the children of the worm. The many enemies were defeated. Vaiken asked about when Zosimos had managed to learn magic. Then he added that thanks to him, he had managed to finish his training. He had something special for him. A small dark sphere began to appear in the protagonist's hands. Continuing to hold it in his hand, he moved away from the spikes that the worm launched at him. However, one of them still scratched his face. The main character was very angry about this to himself. He abruptly launched the sphere towards the worm. After that, he said that everything was ready. Vaiken himself did not close his eyes for a minute. After that, everything around was in smoke. A moment later, the smoke cleared. It turned out that everything around, including the monster itself, was frozen. It turned out that these were ice drops. The artifact, with the help of the movement of the surrounding molecules, creates absolute zero. Everyone started asking what it was, how it all turned around in one moment. Zosimo said that they had to use a lot of artifacts, and he didn't think that Vaiken would have to use ice drops, to which the main character closed his eyes, took out his weapon and said that nothing could be done. The enemy was serious. But they dealt with him without human losses. Vaiken then launched his staff straight towards the worm. It hit its body, causing it to shatter into tiny pieces. All the men were shocked by what he had done. The broken worm began to fall to the ground in pieces, breaking even more. The main character stood among these blocks. Vaiken had a big smile on his face, and it was red. He had a magic stone in his hands. He said that the magic stone they would get from the worm could be worth much more than the one in his hand. He had a desire to create. It was as if the whole world was painted in bright colors at that moment. The professor addressed him by name. The protagonist turned towards him and joyfully said that he was alive. To which the man replied that alchemists were really capable of such a thing. In response to his words, Vaiken said that this is not a competition of what is better and what is worse. They, alchemists, are also capable of many things. To which the professor, with a smile on his face, happily said that he had opened his eyes, after which he thanked him for it. The others were shocked by his words. It was unexpected. Gizar looked at the frozen sculptures and said that the demon king Talos, who had achieved all the deep secrets of magic, did not think that he would be able to see it. The protagonist realized that an unknown name had surfaced. Although, in fact, it sounds quite familiar. He just doesn't remember it because it was 500 years ago. At this point, Bayo turned to Vaiken and asked what they were going to do now. Vaiken asked what he was even talking about. Then he asked what to do with the report for the guild. To this, the main character said that everything was very bad. He thought to himself that Beowulf was absolutely right. A monster appeared that no one had ever seen, and the alchemist immediately defeated it. Vaiken thought that when they found out about this, he would probably receive a summons to appear in the royal capital. A new day had come. All the battles were over. They returned to the city. Someone called out to the protagonist and asked if he had a minute. He immediately turned around. The guy in the cape said that lately they had been hearing about Vaiken from all sides, to which the latter hesitated and asked who he was. The guy asked him again. Then he said with a slight grin on his face that his name was Tarask. He, unlike him, was a simple alchemist. The protagonist remembered his previous encounters with this guy. Then he said that he just had moose, the cheapest ingredients that can be found. He felt uncomfortable with these memories. Vaiken said that he got his job because of him, so he thanked him for that time. Then Tarask said that now everyone is talking about him. The guy smiled very slyly and said that he just wanted to ask questions to their new rising star. Then the main character asked him again what questions exactly. Tarask's look immediately changed. Tarask extended his hand to him and asked him how he saw this world. Vaiken was taken aback by his words and did not know what to answer. The protagonist said that he did not understand the meaning of this question. Then Tarask said that he was simply interested in knowing the alchemist's opinion. Vaiken thought that as an alchemist like himself, he was sad to see how they were treated. The alchemical culture had died and magic had begun to flourish. As an alchemist, he couldn't say he liked it. However, the main character doesn't like the way he looks at him, and in general, he is too close to him. Then Vaiken started shaking his hands in front of him and saying that he wasn't that different from him. He was just doing the best he could. Tarask was surprised by his words. After that, the guy asked if he really wanted to say that he had no complaints. To which the main character confirmed his words and said that everything was fine. Tarask smiled at him sweetly. Vaiken thought to himself that he hadn't convinced him yet. Out loud, he said that they alchemists always do only one thing. Then the guy asked what he meant. The main character smiled at him slightly and calmly said that they were creating a better future with the help of alchemy. Then Vaiken asked Tarask with a wide smile if he thought the same, and added that all alchemists work for a common goal. At this, the latter blushed. At first, he couldn't even find something to answer. Then the guy smiled and said that Vaiken was right. Everything was exactly like that. They all strive to create a better future. Tarask turned to leave him, telling Vaiken that he had a dream and one day he would like to share it with him. The guy thanked him for the conversation. The protagonist did not expect this. He did not know what to say. Zosimos asked him what he was going to tell him, to which Vaiken said that he had no idea at all. However, he reminded him of his old alchemist friends. The assistant agreed with him and said that he was a bit like Vaiken. He also radiated eccentricity. To which the latter said that it was rude, they cannot be put in the same row. After some time, the main character held an envelope in his hands. His face was very surprised. He asked if he had really received an invitation, to which sweet Shirley in the guild confirmed his words and said that this invitation was from His Majesty and the Royal Academy of Sciences. To this, the main character made an indifferent face and said that he was not interested in it, after which he asked to throw it away. The girl said that it was impossible. She continued speaking and said that one cannot refuse the king's invitation, to which he asked her that he was a simple, petty adventurer, so he did not understand what they wanted from him, to which Shirley explained that she doubted that a simple little adventurer could defeat a legendary monster that had not appeared since the founding of the country, which is why he had received the invitation. Vaiken simply sighed. At this time, he was surrounded by other adventurers who said that they had all heard that he had really accomplished another feat, that he had even been invited to the capital. It was such a privilege to receive an audience with the king. Zosimo said that everything looked as if that professor had told about him in the capital, to which Vaiken remembered his face and agreed with his assistant. Then he turned to Shirley again and said that he really wasn't interested in visiting the capital, so could he decline the offer? She said that he couldn't do that, so they would pay for his carriage and hotel in the capital. The girl also said that if he talked too much, they could give him a carriage with iron bars, to which Vaiken said that this is how criminals are transported. He realized that it was useless to argue. He then asked Shirley again if the invitation extended to anyone who came with him. She replied that accommodation would be paid for anyone he took with him, and bodyguards could be paid for. After some time, the protagonist came out into the city. He looked very thoughtful. Zosimos asked him what he had in mind, to which Vaiken smiled and said that he would use this situation to go on a trip with Fio. He had broken his promise recently to go to the party. Zosimos said that it was very tricky, to which the main character said that there was one problem. The assistant immediately looked at him as if mentally asking him a question. The protagonist explained that he had never invited a girl on an adventure before, to which Zosimos said that he was a virgin. Vaiken ignored his words and said that he had an idea. He showed his assistant the perfect plan in which he would persuade the girl to go on a trip with him in 6 steps, and the first of them was to create a good atmosphere. At the same time, Vaiken was very enthusiastic about his idea. The protagonist thought that all this would be natural and not at all strange. This is definitely the perfect plan. After some time, the protagonist reached Fio. The latter smiled sweetly at him, called him by name, and then wanted to rejoice at his return. But her speech suddenly stopped. Vaiken jumped up to her, took her by the shoulders, and then abruptly told her that they needed to go on a trip together. The girl was shocked by his words. She simply asked him again, to which the main character after some time screamed, grabbed his head, and then cursed, since his perfect plan had failed. Zosimos also confirmed his words and said that it was a complete failure. Fio stood and did not understand what was happening. However, after a few days, they set off on a journey together. The girl was very happy. She called out to him and told him that there was a hot spring in the next town. The main character asked her with a smile whether this was really so, after which he suggested stopping there and buying some materials for alchemy. Zosimos turned to him and said that somehow they were enjoying the trip to the capital, to which the latter replied that he was indeed glad. Then he remembered the reaction of Fio and her father. Vaiken said that Edgar had given his permission, so he was grateful to him, and then added that perhaps he should thank the king for receiving this invitation. The protagonist exhaled. Zosimos said that an invitation from King Saliari 500 years ago would have been a complete disaster. Vaiken immediately remembered the past. When he was invited to meet the king of his time, he was filled with pride. However, in the end, only money and politics were discussed there. The king turned out to be a boring man who only offended him with his plans for alchemy. The aristocrats around him were exactly the same. They saw alchemy as a means to their own low ends. The protagonist remembered his feelings then. At that moment, he felt only disgust. He still remembers it clearly. At that moment, Fio called out to him. She asked if he was listening to her. Then she added, "The hot springs of beauty." "These are the hot springs of beauty," to which he replied that he, of course, listens to her. The girl continued and said that even the appearance becomes better when you go down in them. If she dives in there, she will attract so many clients. The main character looked ahead and said with a smile on his face that Fio was already very cute. The girl was shocked by his words. In his mind, Vaiken thought about how women instinctively strive for beauty. 500 years ago, there were a lot of orders for beauty serums and potions. Maybe he should make some for Fio, too. The latter blushed with embarrassment at this point. The protagonist asked her if she was seasick. Then he added that it was strange, since the potion he had prepared for her should not lose its effect for another day. Fio smiled and said that everything was fine. She thought her heart would jump out when he complimented her. To which he said that if she needed more potion, he could give it to her in about 30 minutes, but he still didn't recommend it. Zosimos flew up to the girl and told her to forgive her master's stupid insensitivity, to which she laughed and said that it was still like him. The assistant flew closer to the main character and said that she should know that he would not just compliment the girl in a new place like that. The main character resolutely said that he was telling only the truth. Fio is really very cute and could well become a model. Then Zosimos asked him what he meant by the word cute. He replied that he had no clear criteria for defining female beauty. What is important to him is an expressive face, cherry-colored lips, a gentle look, brown eyes, hair that is like sunbeams. The protagonist has a lot more to say, but everything he likes may depend on the person himself. Of course, considering that it is Fio, he may indeed be biased. Vaiken said that he was really attracted to her, so he couldn't judge objectively. Then he scratched his chin. A gentle smile appeared on his face. He said that if he says Fio is cute, then she is cute. The protagonist continued to ponder this question. It was clear that he approached it seriously. At this point, Fio said that he might not continue, while her face was very red from embarrassment. Bacon looked at her without turning his head. At first, the girl sat quietly. Then she covered her face with her hands. He also turned his gaze to the road in front of him, and then it dawned on him that he had said all this right in front of Fio. At that moment, Zosimos thanked him for the detailed explanation. The guy immediately began to blush and try to justify himself to her. The girl looked at him hurt and asked if he had really lied. He looked at her in shock. Then Vaiken turned away from her and said no. He added that it was too honest, so he asked her to forget half of it. To which she replied that she would not do that. She folded her hands in front of her face and, shyly, said that she was glad that he had opened up to her about his feelings. The protagonist continued to be confused. A week passed. Zosimos informed him that they would soon arrive in the capital, so they needed to get ready. They reached the royal capital of Jewry. Theo said that it was beautiful here. The whole city was glowing. She immediately suggested enjoying the capital and going shopping, to which the parent asked her about the king. Then Vaiken grabbed her hand and with a smile on his face said that there were no problems. He was in no hurry to get involved in politics. And the king hardly had time to meet with some alchemist. Fio tried to argue with him and say that this was an audience with the king, to which he replied that he didn't care. At that moment, the guards called him by name and asked him his name. The man greeted him and then said that they would escort him as His Majesty was already waiting for him. Vaiken was upset by these words and Fio wished him luck. After some time, they reached the castle. The main character was escorted into the hall. The king of the kingdom of Jewry, Jonas III, and his subordinates were already there. Vaiken greeted him and said that he had arrived as soon as he had finished his work. He said that he was an alchemist and his name was Vaiken Ordo, to which one of the men in glasses said that it was disrespectful to open one's mouth without permission. To which Vaiken thought that introducing oneself used to be good manners. He apologized out loud and asked to start over. Then the king, without taking his eyes off him, asked if it was true that he had easily defeated the legendary monster. To which Vaiken replied that this was absolutely not the case. He thought to himself that the monster was not legendary at all, but a completely ordinary one that appears due to a certain pattern. Then the king asked him if this was a rumor. To this, the main character explained that, unfortunately, he lives in a remote village and he does not know what they are talking about in the city. At this moment, one of the king's subordinates loudly asked what kind of disrespect this was. In the presence of the king, he does not even kneel, and even answers with an arrogant smile. Vaiken wondered if etiquette had changed again. He said out loud that he came from the village and didn't really know etiquette. If he had been warned in advance, he would have at least prepared. A moment later, the main character dropped to the floor to his knees, after which he asked if everything was okay now. All his subordinates looked at him in shock. The guy asked what he wanted from him. Vaiken added that if he had any requests, he could contact the Adventurers Guild. They would also determine the payment for his services. The king said that he had heard that the protagonist made and sold magic potions, and then asked what potions he could make. He replied that he could make many, and asked what exactly he needed. After that, Vaiken looked up at the king. The king was also looking at him. And at that moment, the guy asked about maybe needing a potion for hair loss. The king got very angry at these words. After which the main character was put in prison, he ended up behind bars. Susimo said that it was a complete failure. He hoped that his master would be executed quickly. To which Vaiken said that he was in no hurry to die. He was simply Kriento-oriented. He immediately understood what people had problems with. The protagonist asked the assistant if he would come back for him to order the potion. To which the latter replied that it would happen in about 3 days, presumably. But it was not a fact that he would be released. Vaiken said that he didn't want to sit there, so he suggested that he leave. Zosimos asked how he was going to escape. The guy asked if a quick transfer would work. He answered negatively. The assistant said that they could make a fuss because he was going to escape from prison, to which Vaiken said that there would be little good in this. After which, he suggested approaching the problem positively. A glowing object appeared in his hands. The main character said that they would create a potion against hair loss for the king. Then he would definitely forgive him. To which Zosimos said that this was a rather mature answer. He thought that he wanted to kill everyone and run away. The guy was outraged by these words. Vaiken added that he felt like it wasn't just his hair that was bothering him. He was pretty tired. Zosimos said that in this primitive age there are no artificial fairies. No wonder he was so tired. The main character said that in their time everyone had their own artificial fairy. The assistant agreed with him and said that people's lives were better. Then Vaiken offered to make the king an artificial fairy, to which Zosimos said that isn't that an excessive service. He thinks that the potion will be enough. To which the guy agreed. After that, he began the process of creation. First, the main character closed his eyes and folded his hands in front of his face. Then he suddenly opened his eyes and said that everything should be cooked. After some time, the potion was ready. Zosimos said that this was excellent news as expected from such a master. The latter asked whether he praised him or criticized him. He also added that a couple of artifacts needed to be made. At that moment, a soldier passed by. He noticed that the main character was using magic. He asked him what he was doing. The man asked what the device was and where he got it, to which the boy replied that he wanted to give the king a gift as an apology, and then asked him to help him pass it on to him. The soldier asked how he opened the door. Vaiken said that the lock was primitive, that even any monkey could open it. He poured liquid metal into it, and it broke. Then he asked the soldier if he would take him to the king. Then the man raised his weapon and said angrily that it was his job to stop him. The protagonist said that he thought so. At that moment, Vaiken used one of his artifacts, which he threw directly onto the soldier's body. After that, he activated it. At first, the man didn't understand what was happening. Some kind of unclear substance appeared on his equipment. Then, his armor began to oxidize. A few seconds later, the man's body seemed to be naked. He looked at it in surprise and asked what it was. The protagonist did not react to it at all. He turned to Zosimos and said that with this they would easily get to the king. The assistant asked if this was really why he got this artifact. This stuff was called mucus preparation number 18. 500 years ago, this stuff was very popular. Once you throw it, the slime immediately begins to multiply. It melts only the outer clothing, leaving the target naked. In addition, the slime stimulates specific points. Pranks were made with it. Quite quickly, we had to somehow regulate its use. At this point, the attacked soldier again asked what it was and then asked to take it off him. To which the main character turned to him and said that he wouldn't die from this, so he shouldn't worry. He'd just be left without clothes and armor. Zosimos at this point said that if they had artificial fairies, they would easily free them. But they don't. Vaiken said that they just need to move on. The main character was walking through the corridors of the castle when he came across a bunch of soldiers. They said that they had finally reached him and needed to call for help. After a while, Vaiken was surrounded by soldiers. They formed a fairly tight circle and they pointed their weapons in his direction. The guy was a little surprised by this. Zosimus asked him what they were going to do, fight, to which he replied that there was no need to do that. He had created a pile of slime with a reserve because he was sure that he would not pass unnoticed. The main character stood calmly, and at that moment some of the soldiers decided to pounce on him. Then he took out several vials with the drug from mucus number 18 and threw them at them. At first the soldiers seemed to ignore it, but after Vaiken activated the potions, they enveloped the men's armor. They were surprised. Gradually, the armor and outer garments began to dissolve. They asked what it was. The men continued to moan and make some unintelligible sounds. They finally saw that the slime was dissolving their clothes and asked about it out loud. Strange sounds continued to be emitted in the castle corridor, but no one reacted to them in any way. After some time, all the men lay prostrate at the protagonist's feet. He only glanced at them slightly. Suddenly, Vaiken scratched his cheek. He began to get nervous. He also said that it looked somehow not very good. The assistant agreed with him. After that, the main character turned away and said that he didn't want to look at wet men. Zosimus said that he was once again convinced that he had no heart. The guy said that this was the best of the illegal artifacts. The assistant said that in that case, he could simply use an artifact that changes appearance. To which Vaiken said that he had not thought of it. At that moment, a girl attacked him. He barely managed to escape the attack. The stranger tried to hit him several times, but he succeeded each time. UI from the attack. After that, he landed on the floor. The main character thought to himself that she was fast, different from the rest of the guards. He thought that this was someone strong. The girl said that she found him, calling him by name. The stranger had a sword in her hands. She said that she had received an official decision to execute him, so he needed to get ready. The main character raised his hands up in front of him. He hesitated and said that he hadn't hurt anyone yet, to which the girl did not react at all. She only slightly changed her position and told him to prepare for death. It turns out that her name was Princess Guardian Maya Fonte. Vaiken tried to explain himself to her. He asked to listen to him and explained that he just wanted to talk to the king, but she didn't let him finish his speech. She immediately attacked him furiously. He managed to dodge the attack at the last moment. The girl said that she would not allow him to approach the king, to which Vaiken tried to explain to her that he had medicine for the man. Then Maya asked if he really wanted to poison him, calling him a villain. The protagonist dodged another blow. He landed on bent legs, after which he decisively said that she was one of those who did not listen. Vaiken tried to argue with her and explain that he just wanted the king to enjoy life, to which she responded that he was clearly distributing illegal substances. He asked her again in shock. Maya Fonte said that he was dodging her attacks, which meant he was definitely not a simple person, to which he responded that he was just an ordinary alchemist. Zosimus asked if he should use the artifacts, to which he replied that he could do without them for now. The assistant asked why he was doing this, since the girl was fighting seriously. Vaiken agreed, but hesitated with his answer. The main character began to say that if he were to fight seriously, she would be offended, and it was unlikely that she would recover so easily after defeat. The guy also added that he didn't want to use force, otherwise what impression would he make on the king? Maya clearly didn't like that. The main character continued to say that she was a girl, and you can't do that with the weaker sex. The girl was almost grinding her teeth in anger. Her anger reached a certain point. She shouted at him that he was a bad person, and then asked if he underestimated her. The main character was shocked that she had really heard him. Maya was screaming that she would execute him, that she would cut his head off. The guy thought that now she would definitely not listen to him. At that moment, the girl rushed towards him and dealt him a very strong blow. However, he was a little exhausted, but his condition was normal. Maya looked at him and thought that she had hit him with all her strength and he was still alive. Zosimus said that he had to use a weapon, to which he replied that everything was fine. He was defending himself, not attacking. The assistant said that this was a strange rule. Zosimus said that he really had to defend himself, so maybe it was time to give in and use the rest of the artifacts. But the guy responded that he would like to avoid further combat. He thought to himself that he could use this. In his head, he was already imagining how the potion would affect Maya. His face turned slightly red. At that moment, his assistant called out to him and said that he thought he was thinking about something bad. He asked him to shut up, because there was nothing wrong with that. While he was having a dialogue with Zosimos, the girl attacked him again. She said that during the fight you can't get distracted. He managed to escape the attack literally at the last moment. At one point she managed to knock him off balance, causing him to fall. She said that he was caught. As he fell, Vaiken threw a vial of potion at her. She cut it, but it still hit the target. After a few moments, her armor began to dissolve along with her clothes. She was shocked and asked what it was. The protagonist cursed a little when he saw the picture that appeared before him. Zosimos said that, of course, this was not what he wanted. This was clearly said sarcastically. Maya Fonte continued to struggle with everything. She had almost no clothes left, but she said that it was a rather lustful thing, after which she asked if he really thought he could defeat her like that. The main character said that he was not going to defeat her. She broke the test tube herself. She asked him to shut up and rushed towards him. Suddenly she felt something. Vaiken told her that she better not twitch too much. She again asked him to shut up, and then added that it would not stop her. However, with each step she became more uncomfortable. The guy said that it was all because she was moving so much. If she calmed down, then she would feel better, as would the other guards. Maya Fonte said that she now understands where all the guards went. She asked not to underestimate her because she is a princess guardian. The girl tried to do different things and techniques. She said that no matter what happened, she would protect the king's life. However, even her strength was exhausted. Zosimos said that it was surprising. Not many people can resist the slime. To which the main character agreed that she was a strong girl. At that moment, Vaiken said that even a person like her had a limit. He approached her. After that, he poked her lightly on the forehead. Her eyes widened very much. It was all because the mucus increased her sensitivity. The main character said that no matter how she restrained herself, her whole body was now very susceptible to external influences. Zosimos told him that he was a real devil. To which the guy replied that he could look at her a little longer. Then the assistant was silent for a moment, and then asked if he should really tell Theo about this. The main character immediately remembered the girl and froze. After that, Vaiken sharply told him that he had to leave here. Zosimos said that he has more than 60 words in his dictionary that can be used to describe him now. The guy asked not to say anything. After some time, they left the castle. The main character said that, surprisingly, they got out easily. To which the assistant said that if the castle had been ready for the attacks of a bad person, they would have withstood. Zosimos said that both the captain of the royal guard and even the prime minister were still writhing with pleasure. At this point, the protagonist said that he at least managed to give the potion to the king, and he had already disabled the activation code for the slime drug. It can be assumed that everything is fine. After that, Vaiken said that now was the time to return to Theo, since they were already late. To which the assistant said that he was always good at ignoring responsibility. After some time, they reached the Hotel Tuesday. Theo smiled at them and greeted them. She asked how everything went, to which the main character smiled sweetly at her and said that, of course, everything went without any problems at all. The girl asked him how he was in the castle, to which he went into his thoughts and remembered all the events that had happened. After that, the guy came out of his thoughts. He started scratching his face from nerves. He said that he was nervous, so he didn't remember everything well. The main character thought that the king looked too much like a king. She laughed and asked what was strange about that. Vaiken changed the subject and suggested they go shopping instead, after which he apologized for making her wait. She suggested that he rest a little as he looked tired. The main character smiled warmly at her and said that everything was fine. If he was with her, the tiredness would disappear. The girl was embarrassed again. Her face turned red. She even started to tremble. Vaiken didn't understand what was happening. At that moment, Zosimos said that it was good. After that, they finally went outside. Theo asked if they should go to a restaurant, to which he said that it was a personal idea. They should go. Blossomed on her face. The girl said that they should go to the seafood and vegetable restaurant Bistro Akechi. Vaiken said that it sounded great, and then they held hands. The main character blushed at this gesture. Theo started to giggle. He asked her what she was doing, to which she said that it was strange she had yelled at him the first time they met. Vaiken agreed with her and added that she had also hit him. Memories of their first meeting came back to him. The main character said that although it was not that long ago, it felt like they had known each other for ages. He giggled. The girl closed her eyes and agreed with him, saying that she had the same feeling. After some time, they returned to the hotel. It was evening. The protagonist was sitting in the room and looking at the diagram. Zozimo said that writing on paper is very old-fashioned. He asked Vaiken if he had forgotten about his artificial fairy. Vaiken replied that it was easier to design if you drew on paper. The main character said that he was designing an artificial fairy Elena for Fio. He had a happy smile on his face. The support artifact is an artificial fairy. It is a tool that greatly improves people's lives. But Zosima, developed by Vaiken, was developed with a different purpose. She has her own artificial intelligence. But if necessary, other artificial fairies can express emotions, think, and speak. Zozimos listened to his speech and said that he understood everything. This was his younger sister. Then the main character asked him if this made him happy. His assistant said that it was quite a difficult question. He asked him what he should call this mixture of anxiety and delight. The protagonist thought about his question. After a while, he suggested that perhaps this was called arousal. Then Zazimo said that he understood everything, but it seemed to him that he was just happy. However, he needed advanced alchemical equipment for this. To which Vaiken said that since the towers of the sages remained, there was equipment. Fiel approached the main character, put her hands on his shoulders, and asked what he was doing. The guy gently grabbed her wrists and pressed her to himself. He told her that it was a secret he didn't want to spoil the surprise. To which the girl replied that it was no longer a surprise. Vaiken replied that it would remain a surprise, as she would be waiting with great interest. A new day had come. The sun was shining brightly outside the window. In the hotel, pleasant sounds were heard from one room. The main character woke up, scratched his head, and asked who was knocking on their room door. To which he was told that it was the owner of the hotel, Choose. Bacon opened the door for the man. He said that someone had asked to see him. Then he asked if he had a minute. To which he asked who it could be. The man said that the visitor was a girl from the Imperial Guard. Her name was Maya Fonti. Vaiken was upset when he heard this. After some time, the main character with an awkward smile on his face approached her, called her by name, and asked if she really needed anything. At his words, the girl made a very displeased face, which conveyed how much she did not want to see him. She also called him by name. The main character smiled broadly at her and said that the motto of alchemists is, "Let's make the world a better place." Then he added that he was one of the alchemists and said that his name was Vaiken Ordo. Maya looked at him in shock, her face reflecting extreme fatigue from the whole situation. The guy laughed at this. Sasimo said that he reminded him of a pseudo-religious guru. The girl simply gave in. She sighed heavily and said that the king was calling him again. He was shocked by these words. The main character said that he had to refuse because he was leaving tomorrow morning, to which Maya was indignant and said that this was a challenge from the king himself. Then Vaiken said that it was time for him to go back. He had nothing more to do here. To which the girl again said that this was a challenge from the king. The protagonist thought to himself that she was clearly not going to listen to him. Out loud, he said that he was a careless person in general. Suddenly, he would say something again and they would throw him in prison again. To which the girl immediately remembered how he had treated her. Her face turned red. She said that she didn't want to come here either, but she had to bring him to the castle. Then Maya Fontes said that thanks to the potion that the main character prepared for the king, the latter decided to hush up what he had done in the castle. Bacon said that no formalities were needed for the potion, but if you really needed it, you could just say thank you. The girl answered negatively and added that he should come to the castle tomorrow morning. The main character thought that this was all a tyranny. He hated the people in power. He said out loud that he would come. Maya Fonte turned to leave the room. Arena said that they were expecting him tomorrow. He should come. The main character thought that he had caused them so many problems, and now he was being called there again. His assistant said that he understood his feelings. Then Vaiken he made a funny face and said that next time he escaped from prison he would not hold back. Here an interesting thought came into the head of the main character. He asked about the fact that maybe they were all strange there and got hooked on the way he treated them. After that, Bacon grinned slyly and said that this was great news. This time he would prepare 3,000s in advance. After this, his face turned red. He even stuck out his tongue in anticipation and said that Maya Fonte would get the worst of it. Zosimo said that drool was flowing from his mouth. He was definitely a bad person. To which the guy asked in surprise if it was true. At that moment, the protagonist saw Maya Fonte suddenly fall to her knees, her body shaking. She turned to him with tears in her eyes and said that she would kill him. He cursed under his breath. A new day has come. The main character, as promised, came to the king's castle. There were a lot of people there again. Vaiken and the king looked at each other, but neither of them made a sound. The others were silent as well. After that, the king said that, first of all, he should know that they would not ask him questions about his behavior yesterday. The guy was surprised. Then the protagonist thanked him for understanding. After that, the man in glasses said that they needed to talk about the potion, gratitude and a reward for it in an envelope. The king joined their conversation and said that they would now like to discuss the future. The protagonist was surprised by his words. The man said that from the previous incident they knew that he was a capable alchemist. If he was an agent of another country, their country would have been destroyed that day. The main character thought to himself that he had never thought about this at all. Out loud, he said that such an option was possible. The man in glasses noted this, emphasized the words, and said that they took it into account. Then he pointed his fingers at Vaiken and said that they had decided to invite him to work in the castle. The protagonist immediately asked him. The man in glasses said that from now on he would be watching over the development of alchemy in their country in the name of His Majesty the King. Everyone present immediately began to clap with joy, to which the main character asked what to do if he didn't want to. The people around froze with their mouths open. At that moment, the guards surrounded him again. They held their spears in front of them, ready to attack him at any moment. They called his name again. The man in glasses said that the main character is very strong and very dangerous. They cannot let him fall into the hands of other people. The man also added that they had to do everything right for this reason. Then Vaiken asked him if they really thought he could be controlled, to which he was surprised. The main character said that someone really needed his alchemy. He asked that if he had not broken out of prison, they would have paid attention to him. To which the man in glasses replied they wanted to pay attention to alchemy for this very reason. They wanted to create a government body that would be governed by law. The protagonist said that they should not lie. There are no laws in this country that would control alchemy and alchemists. There are not even laws that concern the sale and distribution of potions of one's own making. To which the man, visibly nervous, said that it was because they didn't have an expert. Then Vaiken said that they really wanted him to create the law that he considered necessary. After this, the main character said that they would not be able to have a conversation. He treats them with respect, but refuses to take part in this. At that moment, one of the king's confidants ran up to him from the side. He pointed a spear at him and asked him if he really didn't understand anything. The soldier continued to say that he couldn't ignore His Majesty the King. He then asked Vaiken if maybe he should cut off his head here and now. No matter how powerful his artifacts were, there were many of them, they would do the job. To which the main character resolutely said that with so many people they would not be able to stop him. This soldier was taken aback by his words. After this, Vaiken addressed His Majesty directly. He asked the king whether this soldier was acting on his orders. The latter was even surprised by the question. Then the king began to get nervous. He turned to the main character and told him to wait. His soldier just had a hot temper. However, the soldier ignored these words. He said that he was not going to suffer any longer. This man was dangerous to the kingdom, so this evil must be eradicated. The main character told him that if this man does not listen to him and wants to kill him, then he will be forced to treat him as a villain. Vaiken also added and said that the soldier was clearly much angrier than him. The latter really got very angry at his words. The man immediately told the protagonist that he was a bad person, after which he swung the weapon at him. At that moment, the guy used the activation again. So, on the body of the soldier there appeared a slime, which also began to dissolve his clothes and armor. The man did not understand what it was and what was happening at all. The protagonist explained that this was a drug made from mucus number 18. There was nothing to worry about, the soldier would just not be able to move for a while. But he probably knew that himself. The soldiers watching this were shocked. One of them angrily shouted that he had started doing it again. At the same time, the clothes on the first soldier's body almost completely disappeared. He could only make strange sounds which clearly confused the other guards. The protagonist rose from his knees. He closed his eyes and said in a calm voice that they were no different from bandits. They decided everything with bad actions. After that, Vaiken turned around. He said that their conversation was over, so he was leaving. The king tried to stop him, calling his name. The protagonist did not turn around at the sound of his voice. He simply told the man to control the people around him. The guy also said that alchemy brings people closer to a happy future. It cannot be used for one's own selfish purposes. The king became nervous from his words. However, there was a feeling that he understood something for himself. Zosimos asked if he could remove the drug from the guard commander's Gertie, to which Vaiken said that let him lie down a little longer. He definitely will not die. A week later, they returned home and immediately headed to the Dancing Duck Inn. Theo smiled and told her father that they were home. The man immediately approached them, greeted them with a smile on his face, and then asked how their trip went. To which Theo said that it was a lot of fun. They bought a lot of souvenirs. The man asked to show them. At this time, Vaiken asked him how he managed here without his daughter. He answered that China helped him. The last one greeted him. It was the same girl who was locked in the mirror dimension. The protagonist immediately remembered scenes from the past when he saved her. He said out loud that he was glad that everything was fine with her health, to which the girl smiled and thanked him, after which she added that she was already as fit as a fiddle. Vaiken said that he was happy for her. Theo also thanked the girl for helping her dad. China said that there was no need for gratitude. Plus, they definitely needed to rest for now since they had just arrived. Theo said that she definitely would not refuse such an offer, after which she took the protagonist by the hand and said that they would go and drink tea in the room upstairs. Here, Vaiken and the girl realized something. Dad was also looking at them strangely at this time. He asked what had happened. Had they really become so close? When had they managed to do it at all? To which Theo carefully turned around and said that he had definitely imagined it. China came to their aid and said that it was quite logical because they had just returned from a trip. The man agreed with her. Vaiken exhaled. However, he immediately jumped up to the main character and said that when they drink together, he will definitely tell him everything. The guy was shocked by his words. The protagonist turned red. He was tense because of the whole situation. The only way out for him was to simply agree. After some time, Vaiken and the man found themselves in a bar. There were glasses with drinks in front of them. While his dad was talking to him, the guy was thinking that he would feel bad again tomorrow morning. The next morning, the hero felt tired and hungover. He sat holding his head. His face was pale. The artificial village reminded him that the owner had drunk 3 times more than was allowed. The young man replied that he remembered it. However, he did not regret it at all, because the night of drinking with Edgar was worth it. They were able to spend a good time together at last. The system commented that it would never understand when a person puts fleeting pleasure above health. Kin pointed to the crates of bottles and said that he had had time to not only have fun, but also to work. He had made several crates of the potion. The fairy reproachfully noted that even when drunk, the alchemist could create magical drinks. The hero added that they had also worked a little in the workshop, and soon he would be able to prepare even more. Suddenly Maya appeared in front of him. She came to the guy with a request. The young man understood what exactly the princess, who knelt before him on one knee, wanted from him. He asked what she was doing in such a remote place. Ken noticed the royal person kneeling and noted that this was how one bowed, and what he had done before was wrong. The girl formally addressed Ord. Maya said that by order of His Majesty she would serve the hero. The young man knew nothing about this decision of the king, and hastily said that he had not been warned about it. The girl pulled the letter and the boy quickly opened it. He read that the king wanted to apologize for his arrogant ignorance, so to show his sincerity, he decided to send his daughter to Ken. His Majesty wrote, "Maya is an excellent knight. Besides, the girl was educated so she could be useful to him." Jan hoped that Ken would eventually be able to love Juri. That was the end of the letter. After reading, the young man had no choice but to ask the princess to return home. Maya was indignant. The boy explained that he did not want to have anything to do with the royal family. The girl said that she could not return to the castle. She honestly admitted that she had been sent to recruit the hero through seduction. The young man remarked that she should not always be so sincere. He began to leave, and the girl tried to stop him. She said that Ken couldn't leave her like that. The princess reminded him of the dirt he had done to her, because now, after that, no one would marry her. The young man began to remember how he had sent slime at Maya, which had enveloped her body and prevented her from moving. He apologized for this and remembered that the king had called the girl his daughter. The guy asked if Maya belonged to the royal family. The girl explained that she was a child of a concubine, so many in the palace did not accept her. She added that this was why the decision was made to send her as a sacrifice. Ken asked not to talk about the plan to seduce him as a ritual murder. He said that he had already made his decision. The young man had already accepted the apology and was even ready to help if necessary. But he did not need an assistant. He asked the girl to return home. Maya was not going to back down. She suddenly approached the hero and asked how many times she had to repeat that she was not going back. Ken could not answer from such unexpected pressure. The girl trembled and began to mumble something uncertainly. She shifted her hands over her body and said that the boy could punish her if she was a naughty girl. The young man realized what the girl's interests were and was horrified. Maya told him not to think badly of her and not to call her names. Then she changed her mind and asked him to scold her more. Ken screamed that he didn't want to do any of that. He didn't understand how it could have turned out that way. The artificial fairy explained that it all happened because the gentleman used drug number 8, which opened up a new fetish for Maya. Ken turned to the princess. He asked her to calm down and reminded her that she was from the royal family, so it was not appropriate for her to behave like that. Otherwise, she would be censured. The girl didn't want to listen to him and said that social norms were already dead to her. Nothing constrained her anymore. The young man was in shock. He didn't know what to do with the princess. Hearing the noise, Theo came out to the guys. She asked Ken if they had a client. The young man answered that they had a regular weirdo. The girl did not understand why he was saying this. The princess smiled at the tavern owner's daughter and introduced herself as Maya von Jury, Bacon's new pleasure assistant. Theo was confused. The hero advised her not to take this girl seriously because she had brought misunderstandings just by her existence. Maya looked around and asked if the workshop belonged to them and if there was a tavern here. Theo confirmed it. The princess asked if they could prepare a room for her. The owner's daughter happily agreed. Maya said she was going to stay for a long time and handed over a whole bag of money. Theo's eyes immediately lit up. The girl accepted the payment and immediately ran to prepare everything. Pleased that she and the hero would now live together, the princess smiled slyly at Ken. Ord, in turn, was thinking about how to get rid of her. 10 days had passed since the princess had moved into the dancing duck. Together with Ken, they were working in the garden, picking apples. The young man asked the girl when she was going home. Maya replied that she was not going anywhere. She reminded him that she wasn't so useless because she helped him collect alchemical materials. The guy sighed tiredly. He realized that the girl was serious about being his bodyguard, which made him nervous. Vaiken turned to the princess and reminded her that he already had a lover and that it was Fio. The girl got down on one knee and replied that she knew. Maya, with an excited look, declared that she was not going to be his love. She wanted to be a servant and an instrument for pleasure. The boy shuddered when he saw that look again. That was waiting for punishment. He said that he would never understand her. The girl continued to look at him with a longing gaze. The guy advised her to return to the capital. The princess screamed that she would not return and demanded that the hero continue to call her names. Ken was already tired of her. He sighed heavily. Maya noticed that lately all Mr. Vaiken has been doing is collecting herbs and fulfilling orders for healing potions. She asked if he wasn't going to hunt monsters and conquer the labyrinth. She thought she would be much more useful if he gave her the opportunity to use her sword skills. The hero looked thoughtfully at the fruit in his hand. He replied that he couldn't do that because of it. Ken asked her what would happen if she, as a princess, got hurt when she was near him. From such words filled with care, Maya's body was in debt. Her face turned red and her mouth was filled with strong. She muttered that the gentleman had suddenly become so kind. The hero, on the contrary, was irritated by this reaction. However, Ken really wanted to do something. He thought about going into the labyrinth. The girl immediately lit up. She said that she would go there with the hero, but he was categorically against it. The princess asked why he wouldn't let her. The young man answered that he would go there on a mission from the guild he was registered with. And Maya's bed is not part of the guild. Ken couldn't take her with him. He asked her to be obedient and stay at home. The artificial fairy praised the gentleman. Zosimus thought that the princess would definitely retreat. The guy thought so too. That way he could calmly go into the labyrinth himself. Unexpectedly, Maya handed him a folded piece of paper. The hero unfolded it and asked what it was. The girl said that she was ready for this. The young man read and realized that the princess had already been registered in the guild, and she was also in the same group with Ken. The guy broke out in a cold sweat. The girl said with a smile that the name of their team was Slug Lovers Club. The hero shouted that it was too weird a name and asked when it was possible to drag a person into the group without their permission. The princess replied that they were the ghosts of the royal family. The young man said for his head. He said that the guild organization was run by monkeys. The boy was not ready to accept this. Seeing how upset the master was, Maya asked with an expectant look if he would punish her. Ken was shaking from the fact that he could not do anything to the princess. The fairy said that this time the young man had completely lost. Suddenly the system notified that there was a battle on the western path. The hero ordered Zosimus to observe the situation. The fairy said that there was one man and a strong monster. The young man did not understand how such a creature could be in a place where there were usually few monsters and it was relatively safe. The hero activated his powers and said that they were coming their way. Ken handed the bottle to Maya and told her to drink it. The girl asked what it was. The alchemist replied that it was a speed potion that allowed her to run about 10 meters in 10 seconds. The young man gave one bottle to the princess and one to himself. Before drinking, he said that the purpose of alchemy is to help people. Ken advised them to hurry. He told Zosimus to lead them along the shortest route. The artificial system built a path and told the boys to head forward. After a while, they encountered a huge monster looming over the wounded boy, holding onto the elbow of his severed arm. The hero saw such a monster for the first time, so he guessed whose new species it was. He ordered the fairy to find information about the enemy. The princess screamed for the boy to be more careful and attentive. Ken told the girl to protect the victim. The girl immediately ran towards the boy. The guy was going to deal with the monster. He created circles around himself, from which magical swords appeared. They flew straight at the monster, but the monster didn't care about the attacks. The swords exploded when they touched the enemy's body, but he remained alive. The young man didn't understand why he couldn't hurt the monster. The fairy said that she was still checking the information about the creature in the archives. Then she said that this monster is called the Beast of Hatred. She found the data in records from 500 years ago. The hero's attacks only angered and provoked the monster. They wanted to hit the hero, but he managed to dodge, and the blow landed on the ground. Ken screamed that it was impossible that he didn't know about this monster because he had learned the entire archive. The creature continued to strike from all sides. The guy noted that if it weren't for the speed potion he drank, he would already be dead. Ken needed something more powerful. He was going to attack the enemy until he found his weakness. The young man created magical blades of all the elements that flew in the air around him. He threw the discs at the monster, who defended himself with fury. With his long and strong arms, he broke the hero's blades. The young man continued to throw them. The monster didn't give in. While the monster was distracted, the boy took out the alchemist's staff and jumped, swinging it. He was going to destroy the enemy with one blow. Ken hit the monster and cut it in half. Although the boy had won, he knew he should study this type of monster. Suddenly, Maya's worried voice distracted him. The young man approached her. The girl was sitting next to the boy's body. The princess said they were late. The boy did not move and his eyes were closed. Ken sat down next to the body and advised the girl not to take her eyes off it. He said that he would now show her what future real alchemy could lead to. A magic disc formed in the hero's hands. Various artifacts appeared around the alchemist. A large cup grew in front of him, into which he threw the magical items. After that, the artifacts seemed to dissolve in the cup, and the hero rescued them. He attached the magical items to the disc he held in his hand. A stone appeared from it, and the young man pulled it out. Ken raised his hands up. His power and the artifacts merged together, and the hero enclosed them in a small ball. Without touching it directly, the boy used magic to squeeze a drop out of the stone, which fell right on the boy's head. After that, A light shone around him and the boy came to life. He opened his eyes and looked around in surprise. Maya and Ken were glad to know that the boy was okay. After some time, the heroes were riding horses through the forest. The princess was amazed and impressed by Mr. Vaiken's alchemy. The young man thanked her and said that now she could return home and tell the king about the possibilities of magic. Maya confidently said that she would stay by his side. She wanted him to help people. The guy was not particularly happy about this, and he had an idea. The alchemist suggested that the knight tell what exactly he had just done. The girl was not against it. After that, a continuous stream of information flew at Maya. The hero said that he used the Lemedia potion, explained in detail what it was, how he mastered this skill. He even managed to mention the conceptual device of the third generation brawl. The girl's eyes widened from the overabundance of new information. When the guy finished and asked if she understood everything, Maya could not answer anything because she was simply exhausted. Zosimos commented that the gentleman was pure evil. The young man noted with a sly smile that this was not yet for the level of a knight. However, during the time he spent with Maya, he realized that she, being a member of the royal family, worked for the people. The young man sincerely considered her a good person. He understood that His Majesty had his own goals and points of view that the hero might not understand or accept. But Ken believed that thanks to Maya, he decided to give this country a chance. The fairy noticed that the gentleman had matured in his judgments. When the knight and the alchemist returned to the tavern, night had fallen. On the table in front of Ken lay the defeated monster. The hero did not understand what kind of creature it was. There were no internal organs. The metabolism was incomplete. The epidermis was as if made of metal. The young man examined the monster's mouth and recognized it as a predator. However, there was no tongue in the mouth, which meant that the fangs served as weapons. Although the skeleton at first glance looked like a human one, the presence of a tail and legs resembled an animal. Ken realized that this was not a creature of nature. He asked Zamos to look for more information about this monster. The fairy fulfilled the request. However, no matter how much she looked, the result was the same. Screens with various documents and articles appeared in front of the guy. Zosimos paid attention to the information from the sage of the Modus dynasty, although it was vague but accurate. The hero read it and asked what the fairy thought about it. Everything he saw and read seemed strange to him. Ken noticed that since the first appearance of the monster, there was no more information about it. He came to the conclusion that the monster could be the reason for the fall of the Modus dynasty. The fairy reminded him that this was just a guess. They needed to know more about the monster's history. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The princess came to him. The girl said that she had already reported the monster to the palace and found out that they had some records about him. This is what the hero needed. He asked if he could look at them. Maya said that it would be difficult to do this because the records were a royal secret. The young man ordered Zosimos to find out where the royal archive was and how they could get there. The fairy said that she would find the castle scheme in the database. Maya hesitated for a while, but still decided to find out something from the master. She asked who Vaiken really was. The guy didn't expect such a question. He got nervous and answered that he was an alchemist. The girl assumed that the hero would answer like that, and said that she was not satisfied with such an answer. The young man saw how Maya looked at him. It was a look full of doubt and anxiety. He was not sure that he could deceive her. The princess asked to understand her correctly and added that no matter what, her loyalty to him would not change. Ken casually clarified if she did not refuse the seduction. The hero apologized for asking back and asked why she wanted to know so much. Maya was embarrassed. She wanted to know everything about the man she loved, which was logical for her. The alchemist did not expect to hear a confession from the knight. He glanced at the fairy and whispered what he should do. Zosimos said that the gentleman was behaving pathetically. Suddenly, Maya turned to the magical creature. The girl asked why she looked like that and what artificial fairy meant. Zosimos answered that she was Vaiken's assistant, who was a type of artifact. The young man mentally noted that the fairy had acted quite cunningly and cleverly. Maya hesitantly said that she had guessed about it. It was the hero's turn to confess. Feeling this, he objected, saying that he hadn't even really told his beloved anything about himself. The girl was interested and pleased. The knight suddenly approached the young man and said that having learned his secrets, she would be one step ahead as his woman. The guy immediately began to deny it. He did not understand what was happening and asked if Maya wanted to make him punish her in this way. The princess said that when her father treated her mother terribly, she thought that she would never love a man. However, as soon as she met the gentleman, love overtook her. Finally, the girl sighed and asked for forgiveness. She said everything she wanted, so she was going to leave. Before leaving, Maya asked him to forget everything. She confessed that she just wanted to be honest with her loved one, that's all. Such honesty and sincerity made the hero change his mind. He stopped the princess. Ken said he couldn't give details, but admitted that he had indeed been reborn. The princess looked at the young man in surprise. The hero's gaze became serious and sad at the same time. Ken said that he was a man from the time of the Modus dynasty, and he was an alchemist who lived 500 years ago. Meanwhile, Tarask sat on the cold mountain. Resentment towards Ken filled him. However, despite this, he recognized the truth of the hero. Tarask agreed that alchemists strive to create a bright future, but he wanted the young man to remember something. The boy's face twisted with anger and bitterness. His eyes became dark. He was going to remind Vaiken of all his sins. When Maya learned the truth that the gentleman had been reborn, she asked again in surprise. The young man confirmed and said that due to certain circumstances, he had slept for 500 years. And although he looked young, he was actually 40. The girl agreed, noting that Ken was quite calm for his age. Now the princess knew his true identity. The guy asked if she felt better. The fairy flew up to her master. She asked if the gentleman was sure of what he was doing. He did not understand what Zosimos was talking about because she did not stop him. Maya, having realized everything, smiled. She was glad that Ken opened up to her and thanked him. The young man nodded. He caught himself thinking that perhaps he needed someone to just listen to him. The alchemist admitted to the knight that he too felt better and expressed gratitude. At that moment, Maya's true nature broke the atmosphere and came out. She asked if this secret was now between the two of them. Ken hesitantly replied that she had a duty to keep it. Looking at the princess, the guy asked where her serious attitude had gone. The girl insisted on something else. She asked if he could date someone, since his real age was 40 years old. The young man corrected her a little. He said that in his previous life he had not yet turned 40, so now he was somewhere in his 30s. This news made Maya's nose bleed. The guy didn't understand why the girl reacted that way and then called her behavior unacceptable. The knight asked to scold her even more. A few days later, when everyone was ready, Ken said he wanted to visit his hometown, which surprised everyone. The hero explained that he wanted to work outside the village, so he decided to visit his city at the same time. Fio and Maya approached the young man and said enthusiastically that they would go with him. The boy tried to convince them, saying that the road would be long and dangerous. The artificial fairy supported the owner and added that they would meet monsters on the way. Fio admitted that she wanted to see the place where her beloved lived. Ken understood her feelings and thought about it. The young man knew that Maya would be able to stand up for herself, but he was not sure about Fio. Suddenly, Zosimos got ahead of the master and agreed to take the girl on a journey. Ken did not expect this. Fio was happy and hugged the fairy. The hero mentally grumbled at Zosimos, who should help him and not take away his girl's love. The boy had no choice but to turn to Edgar for help. The man laughed and said that the boy was old enough to want to go home. He asked Ken to take the girls with him. Edgar asked to greet his parents on his behalf. The boy froze at such words. The hero could not tell them the truth. His parents were long dead. But for Fio, this was a great opportunity to see Midas. The young man wanted his beloved to have a chance to know the real him. Watching the girl play with the artificial fairy, Ken was filled with doubts. He was not sure if Fio would accept him after learning the truth because modern people might perceive him as a living dead. Maya told Fia that they would go to the market first thing tomorrow and prepare for the trip. The girl was happy with this plan. The hero looked thoughtfully at the knight. He thought that perhaps with the help of the princess, they could have a good time. Maya noticed the gentleman looking at her and blushed. She jumped up and down in delight. Ken finally agreed to take the girls with him with a smile. Fio admitted that she was curious to know what her lover's hometown would be like. Their journey lasted 3 days. When the heroes finally reached the place, the artificial fairy reported that they had arrived. However, there was a wasteland in front of them. The girls did not understand anything. Maya asked Zosimos if she was sure that they were in the right place. The fairy answered that the city was underground. Zosimos lit up. The ground beneath the heroes trembled. The fairy opened access to the emergency evacuation exit. When the extra stones and buildings collapsed, the guys saw the only stone entrance in front of them. Inside, a spiral staircase was waiting for them, leading downwards. The young man began to descend first, after which the girls joined him. The fairy made excuses that they wanted to make an elevator, but nothing worked out. The hero replied that it was better than the wrecks. Zosимos agreed with the owner and reported that so far no problems with the ventilation system or lighting have been found. Fio asked her lover where they were going. The hero explained that they were heading to the ruins of the city of Modus. The girl clarified that weren't they heading to his hometown? The young man replied that he would have to explain for a long time, adding that Modus was undoubtedly his hometown. Candles lit up in the corridor, and illuminating the boys with light, they opened up a view of the city, which was destroyed. Ken greeted the girls in the city of Modis. Maya said that the cityscape, which seemed to be painted in gold and silver, took her breath away. The guy noted that everything did not look so majestic, since many things had collapsed. Fio looked at Modis with a smile. She admitted that she considered this city unreal and fabulous. The young man heard this. He approached her and asked again. The girl told that their people have a famous fairy tale, the Golden Town of Modus. Ken asked the fairy about this, but she did not know about it. Zosимos asked Fio to tell them the story. The artificial fairy was going to record the narrator's voice and save it in an archive. The girl admitted that she would be embarrassed. Zosимos explained that she would play the recording every night, like a bedtime story, which Fio did not mind. She began to tell. Long ago, Dill was a young man in a village whose younger sister was very sick. He worked every day to buy medicine, but the girl was getting worse and worse. So the boy decided to take her to the golden city of Modus to the wizards that a traveler had once told him about. He knew that in exchange for help, people needed treasures and submission. However, none of the alchemists agreed to help the young man, all because he did not bring enough money and treasures. Although the wizards already lived surrounded by untold riches, they wanted more gold and silver. The boy was confused. He didn't know what to do. The young man was left on the street with a sick sister in his arms. When he despaired, one person noticed him. When he heard the young man out, he only grinned. However, his face was kinder than any wizard in the city. The man extended his hand and said that the boy was lucky to have met him. As soon as the alchemist said this, he immediately waved his wand and cast a spell on the poor girl. Her body began to glow. She immediately felt completely healthy. The girl could jump and run again. She felt much better. Then the young man thanked the wizard and asked why he had been so kind to them. He removed the hood of his robe before answering. The alchemist smiled and replied that it was important for him to always be kind to people. After that, he turned into the wind and disappeared. The sister and brother were grateful to him and decided to follow his life principle. When Fio finished telling the story, everything became clear to the fairy and the hero. The girl added at the end that it was a famous fairy tale that everyone in Jori knew. She was surprised that Ken did not know about it. He hesitantly agreed. Zosимos suddenly said that the wizard from the story was the master. Fio did not understand what she meant and asked how Ken could be connected to the story. The artificial fairy took away that the boy was the wizard. She told that in this distorted city of gold and silver, greed flourished and good people were rare. The young man approached his beloved and apologized to her for not telling her anything. Fio still didn't understand what he was talking about. The guy confessed that he was a man who lived 500 years ago. Seeing the question in the girl's eyes, Ken explained that he was born a long time ago. Unexpectedly for the young man, Fio, on the contrary, beamed. For her, it was astonishing. Now she understood why her beloved knew so much. Noticing that Maya was not surprised, the girl asked if the princess already knew about this secret. She boasted that she had been told about it faster than Fio. The girl pouted and said that she envied her. She asked if the princess and Ken had been close lately. The guy said that although it sounded implausible, he was on Fio's side. The hero asked his beloved if the new information about him did not repel her. After all, he was 500 years older than her. Fio smiled tenderly and said that she did not care because her kin always remains the same. She came closer and touched her forehead to the young man's. The girl admitted that she was surprised to learn that her young man turned out to be a wizard from a fairy tale. But because of this, she loved the story even more. Maya watched the couple with a smile and seemed to be waiting for something. The artificial fairy drew the gentleman's attention to this. She asked if he would hug her too. The young man replied that there was no need for that. He explained what exactly the girl was experiencing. She felt like a pathetic knight who was being neglected, which she enjoyed. The guy advised Zosimos to look at the princess's face, who was holding back as much as possible in front of Fio. The fairy sighed and agreed that Maya had already been rewarded in this way. The trembling knight said that she was the master's servant, and there were no problems for her because she was a warrior. Suddenly Ken asked her to come to him. He extended his hand and said that since the girl knew his secret, she became part of the family. Maya and Fio approached the young man together and hugged, smiling cheerfully. The heroes went further into the ruined city. The princess noticed that no matter how long they walked, all the streets were covered in gold. The young man said that the alchemists of that time were able to become rich when they learned how to transport gold. He added that the precious metal was so abundant that people used it as a building material to show their superiority. In addition, Modis had many combat alchemists, so other countries were afraid of him. But even such a powerful city, which was expected to prosper for thousands of years, disappeared. The guy did not understand why this happened, but he was going to find out everything. Along with the era, experienced alchemists disappeared. If the catastrophe were to happen again, everything could end much worse. Ken understood that all his friends and loved ones could die. The hero's thoughts were interrupted by a fairy. She said that she had collected as much information as possible from the 3 nearest towers of the sages. Zosimos asked if the master was ready to listen to her. Seeing that Ken was nervous, the girls approached him in support. They smiled warmly at him and nodded. After that, the young man asked the artificial fairy to show him everything. Zosimos obeyed, and a screen appeared in front of him. What he saw was horrific footage of carnage. Monsters of hatred had attacked the city of Modis. They were tearing the flesh of the citizens, killing everyone they saw. The people tried to defend themselves, but nothing worked. The heroes did not expect to see these monsters. Zosimos said that she had something else to show the master. She opened a new screen, and what the guys saw shocked them. Systems like Zosimos were attacking humans. Ken was amazed at what the artificial fairies were doing. Zosimos suspected that there was a problem with the fairy's central control system, the Mother Core. Fio asked if the system was okay, to which the fairy replied that it worked independently of the overall system, since the Mother Core did not influence it. It was the master who created it that way. Ken explained that Zosimos had her own intelligence. He would never dare to connect her to the general system. His fairy was special among the others. The guy asked if she could find out the reason for the breakdown. Zosimos explained that the Mother Core is a practically perfect centralized control system. The fairies were very important because they provided security. Zosimos said that the disaster that Ken witnessed was the fault of humans. She suggested that the gentleman look at what was happening to the wounded people. As soon as the young man wanted to reproach Zosimos for showing death in front of Fio, he saw something terrible. The bodies of people began to melt from the inside and something came out of them. It was a beast of hatred. The assistant explained that this is the true nature of these monsters. They appear from the bodies of people who have been subjected to some kind of influence by artificial fairies. At that moment, the young man realized that the country was destroyed because of the most reliable system, and apparently someone used it against people. Zosimos revealed that 500 years ago there was a massacre caused by the cultivation of artificial intelligence, which resulted in monsters being born due to the influence of the potion on people's bodies. From such an unexpected truth, Ken needed time to think it over. Zosimos was in solidarity with the master because she was also shocked by the news. The young man did not understand the difference between him who survived and those who died. First, his fairy worked autonomously and was not connected to the Mother Core. Second, he was helped by the Cradle of Rebirth. Third, he had subordinates whom he could completely trust and rely on. The guy thought about what could have happened in the laboratory on the day of the disaster. He was lucky that his artifact was hidden deep underground, which is why he was able to find himself in the future. The hero believed that he could have prevented the nightmare if he had woken up. However, he did not have time. Ken was reborn 500 years after the terrible events. The young man trembled at the thought that he had not been able to provide the terrible chain of events. Seeing the guy overwhelmed with emotion, the girls became worried. They sat down next to their friend and tried to convince him that he was not guilty of anything. Suddenly, a screen opened in front of the young man. The artificial fairy reported that she had found something else that could be important for the master. In an instant, his team appeared in front of him. They greeted their boss. Ken was speechless, because he did not expect to see his old friends. They said that Modus had come to an end, so they wanted to record a dying message to the boss. The guys were going to leave the lab and try to stop the disaster. At that moment, the monster of hatred broke through to them. The girl gathered her courage and said that since this was their last day, she would use the chance to confess her feelings to Ken. The comrades were shocked. The guy smiled confidently at the camera and thanked the hero for taking him into his team. He promised that he would not let the monsters destroy everything. Another comrade apologized for changing the settings of the rebirth cradle and said that the boss's illness would be completely cured, after which it would not return. However, he did not know how many hundreds of years later he would wake up and wish the chief a good rest. The comrades promised that they would protect his body with their lives. The girl said once again that she loved Ken. As they parted, they wished that Ken would finally start living for himself. The recording ended. Tears welled up in Phil's eyes. She said that her lover's friends were good people. The young man agreed with her. They were the companions he had been missing. The master ordered Zosimos to break into the black boxes of each alchemy laboratory and collect all information about the mother core and the monsters. He was especially interested in how the monster of hatred appeared in the vicinity of Sullivan. The artificial fairy obeyed. The hero was determined to figure everything out. A huge number of sages and brilliant alchemists lived in the ruined city, but they could not change anything. There was only Ken left, and only he could do something. He knew he had to take advantage of this chance to live a new life and create a better future. He wasn't going to let the disaster happen again. A few days had passed since Modus's visit. The boys had gathered in the tavern when the young man said goodbye to the girls. Theo was worried about him and asked if he could handle it alone. Ken assured her that it was just a little research. Maya wasn't going to lead the gentleman alone. The guy explained that he was the only person who had the fighting power of an entire army thanks to the artifacts. The girl had nothing to say. She retreated and said that she would gather the knights and patrol the area. After collecting the information that Zosimos provided, the young man was able to identify the most suspicious place, which must be believed. It was a burial forest, deep in which there were ruins. It was there that dangerous monsters lived. The archive said that many wizards died there. At that time, they were called alchemists, rhinestones of time, so there was a high probability that they were left from the remains. Ken was more than sure that it could be related to the beasts of hatred, because of which the hero decided to go there to find the truth about this kind of monsters. In case they showed up in the area again, the young man asked Maya to gather knights for a patrol. The princess and the alchemist climbed up to the high ground and looked down at the assembled knights. Ken had not expected Maya herself to lead them. The girl replied that if it was for the people, then it was for the country. She said that if the gentleman realized that it was dangerous there, he should come back. The guy asked her not to worry about him and added that he could protect himself. The young man was worried that nothing would happen near the city. The princess said that she was ready to give her life if necessary. The hero turned sharply to her and said that she must survive because she was dear to him. The girl was delighted to be scolded and told that Ken cared about her at the same time. The young man repeated that he did not want the princess to get hurt and said that if there was danger, she would take Theo and run away. Remembering his former comrades who had given their lives for the safety of the boss, he bitterly asked Maya not to take on too much. The girl did not understand the reason for such words. The boy asked if he could complain. The princess didn't mind. He admitted that he didn't want to be alone and didn't want any of them to get hurt. The girl replied that she understood him. The boy said he was scared. Ken didn't want it to happen again because he had already lost a lot and didn't want to lose even more. Maya said that if the gentleman could live happily and create a wonderful future, his comrades would be happy. Ken was surprised by this thought and then muttered that she might be right. The princess came closer to him and added that he was capable of great things, but he forgot himself. She leaned over and kissed him on the forehead. The girl told the young man to definitely return to them because even the princess herself kissed him. Finally, she asked him not to tell Fio about this. Ken entered the grave forest with the artificial fairy. He asked if Zosimos had found any signs of life, but she found nothing. An hour had passed since they had entered the forest. The hero felt that the atmosphere had become noticeably heavier. Zosimos had said that they might encounter broken artificial fairies, so they had better be careful. Suddenly, the boy heard the sound of a bell, which was getting closer and closer. The fairy said that the sound was caused by movement. She explained that the magic in the air was vibrating and making a sound similar to a bell. The young man suddenly realized that there might be an undead in front of them, considering that Zosimos had not detected any signs of life. The fairy suggested that it might be the guardian of the ruins. At that moment, something cut the tree trunks right in front of the hero. The magical blades began to reach the hero. He dodged them as best he could. When there were too many of them, he threw the explosives. And after the explosion, a witch appeared in front of him. She was much larger than the young man. She was the source of the bell ringing. Ken asked if she could talk. The guy introduced himself as an adventurer and an alchemist. The witch began to mutter about the master of death, destruction, and the end. The monster says that it will bring ruin and death to everything. She asked someone where they were. Ken didn't understand anything. The artificial fairy assumed that it was an automatic reaction to the word alchemist, and said that she had done a full analysis. Zosimos said that it was definitely an artificial fairy standing in front of them. The witch's body began to decompose quickly, after which a monster similar to a huge insect crawled out of it. The monster began to squeal. It asked the owner where he had been and said that a new era was already near. Zosimos asked the owner if he also saw an artificial fairy in front of him, but in the shell of a beast of hatred. He agreed. However, the guy was happy about it. He was sure that he had enough strength to defeat the enemy. The alchemist mentally addressed his fallen comrades so that they would watch, because he was going to show them his true potential.